I ask you what if, right before your eyes, your only love was taken from you. She begged you to save her, but you didn't have the power to do so. Your legs wouldn't move. You lacked both the courage and the strength. The great mage claims it is all useless. That in this world, everything is about power. And for some reason, even he doesn't know he is taken away. The power of existence stands above all else. And that day scarred Aruto's life so deeply that he dedicated his entire existence to the pursuit of power. More than 60 years passed. He tried every method attempted to reach the treasure of the world's most dangerous dungeon. And right there he died without succeeding. He lived his whole life chasing power. And after his death he stood before God. Whoever possessed the tear of God earned the right to meet him in the afterlife. God offers him a choice to rest his soul forever, or to relive the suffering of life for another 20 years. So to save his life and his one true love, he chooses to be reborn and retrace his steps. And that is how the MC earns his second chance. Returning to the time of his birth, seeing his parents again, his mother, beautiful with long hair, and his father, who was still present, determined not to waste a single second of his life. He wanted to start evolving right then and there. But his baby body couldn't even stand up. Something he didn't have in his previous life was the ability to see a system window containing his stats and skills, something only he could see now. The kid, barely a month old, was trying to speak, thinking he was actually managing it. He remembers that God allowed him to choose a gift, not knowing what that meant. God explains that everyone is blessed with a gift when they are born. The gift of unbalanced wisdom, the gift of broken martial arts, the gift of absurdly overpowered magic, or even the gift of infinite charisma. It could also be the gift of inventive genius, or lastly the gift of creation. In his past life, Aruto had the gift of wisdom, and God asks if he wants the same one this time. The MC says he wants a different gift, the gift of creation. The MC, with the wisdom from his past life, was aware of the world's 5 gifts, but had never heard of creation, which God had mentioned, so he aimed for that one. The first thing the MC notices is a system window that is unknown in this world, so it might be related to his new gift. Beyond wanting to save the life of the person he loved, the MC also remembers his parents, who died when he was only 8 years old. It had been so long he barely remembered anymore. It happened on the night of his 8th birthday. A goblin attack on his village. All he remembers is feeling pain when his father sacrificed himself so his wife and children could escape. Even that wasn't enough. His mother threw him far away and begged him to run, alone at the very least. With no choice, he just ran. And as we know, goblins are lecherous creatures, so you can imagine what happened after Aruto escaped. But enough suffering and sad things. Now in his second life, he will do things differently. The first step is to study and progress his intelligence and mental power stats. He studied so much that even his mother thought it was bad. Teasing his father, he trained his mana stats, while kids his age were eating dirt and drawing on the ground. The boy was doing parkour. As other children watched in awe, his agility status and evasion skill level rose. This pattern continued each time Aruto discovered a new ability. 8 years passed in a flash. Aruto sat beneath a tree, honing his innate gift and skills, which steadily grew in power. When his mother returned home, she congratulated Aruto on his 8th birthday. Overflowing with joy, she embraced her son so tightly. Aruto worried he might be crushed. His father boasted that Aruto's handsome looks came from him and declared they would begin Aruto's training immediately, a suggestion his mother readily approved. His mother then congratulated Aruto again, reminding him of his evening trip to the church, to which he agreed. It was custom for all children turning 8 to receive special bracelets. These bracelets served as a form of identity card, and now it was Aruto's turn to receive his. The priest instructed Aruto to stretch out his hands. Aruto, standing in the church, complied, and the priest placed a magic bracelet, proving Aruto's identity onto his wrist. It is better to go to the big city with this, the priest advised. Be careful not to lose it. With the bracelet now on his wrist, Aruto thought at last. His thoughts then turned to the goblins, who were due to arrive in the village in a few hours. Aruto was already crying. He knew he had to pull himself together. The time had come. Remembering his past self, Aruto resolved to save this village. After leaving the church and reaching the forest, Aruto opened his skill board to check his progress. He reviewed his current status. Aruto noted he likely needed to reach level 15 to significantly increase his physical power. His magic, however, stood at level 32, granting him mastery over all skills accumulated during his 8 years. The only skill Naruto didn't fully understand was the ability to create various functional objects. He realized he hadn't activated this ability before, because he simply hadn't possessed the skill, concluding that it wouldn't hinder him in battle. Naruto decided to activate it. It was then that Naruto realized the goblins were already in the forest. Spotting them, he quickly hid behind a tree. 3 goblins, likely scouts, had arrived. Naruto reminded himself to stay calm. He had defeated countless monsters in the past. The goblins, noticing Naruto peeking out from behind the tree, immediately charged him. This would be his first fight in his second life. It was time to demonstrate his training, concentrating his magic. Naruto thought of his daily efforts, resolving not to regret this moment. He was the village's only hope. Naruto unleashed a fiery attack upon the goblins. After killing one goblin, Naruto felt a surge of success, but knew it wasn't enough. As he engaged the second goblin, another attacked from behind. Naruto dodged, realizing he couldn't afford mistakes. After dispatching all 3 goblins, Naruto concluded he needed to strengthen his attacks. He was fortunate he hadn't encountered stronger monsters yet. The moment Naruto dealt with the goblins, the system displayed a level-up notification. Naruto felt a rush of satisfaction. He had defeated them and gained a level. The level up left Naruto feeling lightheaded, almost drunk with power. But then he spotted another goblin charging him. Sword in hand, the goblin managed to injure Naruto. Naruto wondered, was this truly a new wave of goblins? As he dealt with the immediate threat, Naruto glanced behind him only to find an entire horde. He had been caught completely off guard. With his injured arm, fighting such numbers seemed impossible. A familiar despair washed over him. Nothing had changed no matter how he struggled. He couldn't change his fate, Naruto thought, a memory of his beloved flashing through his mind. But then a fierce resolve ignited. Naruto would not give up. He wished he had tried harder. In that instant, his magic power surged to level 50, granting him a new skill, Grave Reaper. As Naruto saw the system window announcing the level increase, he realized he had acquired the crafting skill. Its true power, he understood, would manifest with higher levels. That's why I couldn't use it before, Naruto mused at that moment. A horde of goblins amassed behind Naruto. He wondered if they sensed his weaknesses, not his fighting prowess. As they closed in for an attack, what fate awaited him a moment later? A goblin lunged at Naruto. He narrowly dodged its sword, realizing how close he was to being wounded, and unleashed a fireball. Naruto attacked the goblins, finding it significantly harder with his injured hand, and the relentless onslaught intensified. When a large group of 8 goblins attacked Naruto, this time he felt capable of fighting them off. Trying to believe in his own strength, Naruto immediately activated his grave skill, using magic to send the goblins tumbling into the gorge. Had he truly managed it, it was a grave crafting skill. Gazing at his hands, Naruto rejoiced, a surge of hope telling him his fate could change, now that he had saved the village. At that moment, the system displayed a significant level increase, likely due to defeating the goblins. He recalled hearing that a level increase, an opportunity to advance, often brought with it an increasing pain. With that thought, Naruto lost consciousness. Naruto then opened his eyes. He realized he was cold, with something fluttering near his face. Suddenly he spotted a creature, which promptly hopped away. What was it? A beautiful slime stood before him, revealing its head. Naruto saw a liquid and wondered if he should drink it. After drinking the liquid from the slime's head, Naruto found it surprisingly beneficial. The slime continued to hop, capturing Naruto's attention. What was this creature? Observing it, Naruto concluded the slime wasn't a dangerous monster. In fact, it seemed quite friendly. The slime suddenly jumped onto Naruto's face. He didn't understand what it wanted, and its touch was incredibly ticklish. Soon Naruto found himself atop a mountain, gazing down at his birth village, a small picturesque place nestled in nature. The slime looked ahead and indicated something, but Naruto stated he wouldn't return. He had a person to save, a path to follow, but he remained too weak. Perhaps it was all futile. Roughly a mile away lay Kanagaris, one of the finest underground cities. His goal was to conquer its upper floors and raise his level as much as possible. Naruto then remembered his beloved and considered how he could level up. He recalled the city's appearance, the obstacles and battles awaiting him, knowing only 7 years remained until that fated day. As the slime crawled over him, Aruto stood mentally, apologizing to his parents for his sudden departure. He wrote a letter explaining he had a list of essential tasks he had to complete. Aruto felt this was the end, yet he needed to fix everything. Profoundly grateful to his parents for their boundless love, he was glad to have grown up with them, remembering his father and mother. 8 years had passed, and he was happy. Aruto thought with tears in his eyes, realizing it was time to leave. After leaving his parents' house, the slime followed Aruto, unsure if it was truly watching him, and deeming it dangerous told it he would go alone. It would be difficult for her to defend herself from monsters, but then the slime began to applaud with its limbs. Since she seemed so worried, Aruto decided she could stay close. Agreeing, Aruto and the slime journeyed on. A month later, after defeating a formidable wolf, Aruto decided it was time for lunch. The slime next to him dragged something along. Aruto realized they were fresh wounds from a new wolf, and thanked the slime. She then placed a magic stone directly into Aruto's bag. With magic stones, he wouldn't have to worry about expenses. The slime then placed the stone. It then ran off, seemingly shouting something. Aruto saw where to go. Had the slime truly found them shelter for the night? A moment later, Aruto looked out from behind a mountain. The slime perched beside him. It was a cave, a perfect spot to rest for the night, before heading to kinetic grass tomorrow. Roasting barbecue over the fire. Aruto reflected that low-rank monsters here made finding food easy even without a fight, something he was accustomed to. His body finally was beginning to resemble its previous life's form, fast-growing and unparalleled. A moment later, a system window materialized before Aruto, displaying his level as 32, and his constantly increasing characteristics. He considered that he could raise his level more effectively within a dungeon to become stronger. Aruto sat on a stone holding another in his hand, and ate a kebab. He noticed the slime that had climbed onto him was also enjoying a kebab. Aruto then offered it rice, wondering if it would truly devour everything. Smiling, Aruto considered what could inspire the slime, and looked forward to collecting magic stones. He was delighted to have met it. Then Aruto asked if the slime was truly a predator, a revelation that came as a small shock to him. Meanwhile, an unseen observer watched Aruto from behind the mountain, sensing the gaze. Aruto hurled a barbecue skewer directly towards the hiding spot. He registered a swift dodge. The next moment, Aruto realized the entity moved too fast to track, and a subsequent rapid attack struck him. He knew he wouldn't survive a barrage of blows. At that speed, staring ahead, Aruto saw a demon, not a person. A thief, he surmised, here for his magic stones. Moments later, the figure dropped directly in front of Aruto. She snatched his kebab's end, revealing herself as a girl, with both human and animal features. Stood before him, Aruto stared at her, utterly taken aback. Aruto watched the girl devour his barbecue, and asked if she was a monster. She replied that she was a magika and a traveler, then inquired about his identity. Aruto introduced himself privately, noted that she didn't seem monstrous at all. In fact, she looked quite friendly. The girl met his gaze. Aruto commented on her very cute ears. He then revealed she was from the squirrel tribe, asking if he'd heard of them, only to immediately dismiss the question, saying she didn't care. Aruto simply regarded her with a questioning look. Moments later, the girl vanished from Aruto's sight, reappearing by the campfire where his food cooked. He promptly asked if Aruto minded her finishing it. Aruto, bewildered by her sudden movement, and where she had appeared from, hadn't even heard a please. Meanwhile, the slime tried to snatch the shish kebab from the girl's hands. The following morning, Aruto awoke to find the girl following him. The slime perched on her shoulder. Aruto asked why. She retorted that Aruto was still a child, and since she needed to go to the cinema, she would follow him. Aruto then asked Majika if she herself wasn't a child. The girl replied that, even if one looked like an adult, they remained a child. Aruto insisted he was already an adult, despite planning to go alone. It suddenly dawned on Aruto. Turning to Majika, he suggested they should go now. To make time pass faster, Aruto smiled at the girl, and she agreed. Moments later, Aruto pointed ahead, announcing he had spotted Kaneda. Greece City's landscape appeared before them, framed by a massive wall. As they approached and passed through the gate, a girl immediately approached, counting low taxes and a clean record, inviting them to enter. Since ancient times, Kaneda has signified chaos and a wide variety of races. This is due to the dungeon towering in its center, drawing people fascinated by its allure to gather in the city. As Aruto and Magica entered the city, Magica was visibly scared. Aruto asked what was wrong, and she admitted this was her first time experiencing such a crowd of people turning to Magica. Aruto explained he himself was from a village. She replied that she lived on the street. Aruto confessed he was nervous upon his first arrival. Magica, surprised, pointed out that Aruto had previously claimed he hadn't been here before. Aruto clarified that he had visited with his parents when he was about 10 years old, remembering how he felt the city was alive, with almost nothing having changed since. Aruto looked around contemplating. He wondered if anything significant would unfold in the next 2 years. Knowing caution was paramount, Magica then asked where he was headed. Aruto replied that he needed to visit the Adventurers Guild to earn money for their stay, then asked if Magica would accompany him. She readily agreed upon arriving at the guild. Aruto declared his intention to exchange magic stones. The man at the counter, however, turned to him and stated Aruto was in the wrong place. Aruto looked surprised. The man then told Aruto to leave, claiming the guild was no place for children. Aruto then emptied his bag onto the counter, revealing a pile of magic stones. The man who had just tried to dismiss him watched in disbelief, asking where Aruto had acquired so many. Aruto simply replied that he had obtained them through hunting. This girl standing next to me, whom I defeated, doesn't know how to sell magic stones, Aruto stated, gesturing towards Magica. The man looked at Magica in surprise. She started to protest, about to say she had nothing, but Aruto cut her off, telling her to be silent, smiling. Aruto then realized the total value amounted to approximately 1990 units. The man then informed Aruto of the exact sum: 2 gold, 29 silver, and 85 copper. Aruto reflected that for such a sum, he felt utterly exhausted. He wondered if his exhaustion was simply due to his young age, or a consequence of his rapid growth. As Aruto placed the money into his bag, he asked if he could register as a finder. The man questioned why a child wished to register as an adventurer. Aruto pointed to Magica, stating she was an adult, and added that he personally needed to register due to a significant endeavor. Magica started to speak again, but Aruto quickly covered her mouth, urging the man to hurry as they were short on time. As they left the guild, Magica turned to Aruto, telling him to take her with him and make use of her. Aruto, asking for clarification, then apologized. He explained that at his age, it was difficult to articulate everything clearly, so he merely asked for assistance. He then asked Magica if it wasn't wise to spend time acquiring magic stones, to which she replied that it wouldn't improve his reputation. Magica, walking behind Aruto, then heard him dismiss the idea of reputation. No one gets stronger by merely increasing reputation, he stated. Magica looked at Aruto, clearly surprised by his words. Aruto walked ahead of Magica, stating that with money now in hand, they should find a hotel. He proposed sharing a meal to thank her for her help, but also offered to part ways there. If she had other plans, Magica agreed to go with him, but not without a condition: either money, or they spend time in his room. Hearing this, Aruto simply told her to follow him. What a woman she was, Aruto mused to himself. As evening fell, Aruto expressed his genuine pleasure that Magica had joined him, admitting he had initially expected her to refuse. Seated in their room, they talked. Naruto explained that his unkempt appearance often closed off many opportunities, including access to the delicious food available at this hotel. He believed Magica would enjoy it as well. While Aruto explained something to her in their room, Magica stared intently at him, and Aruto couldn't quite grasp why. Magica then dismissed his unspoken question, declaring she would take a bath. Aruto, seeing her begin to remove her cloak, quickly asked her to undress in the bathroom, not in front of him at that moment. The slime happily settled onto the bed. Clearly tired, Magica, standing in the bathroom, prepared to put on her clothes. Noting this was a new experience for her, stepping out of the shower, she decided she would go straight to bed and enjoy a hearty meal the next morning. Then she noticed Aruto practicing magic, realizing the sheer mana radiating from him. Such a feat was impossible for an ordinary person. Watching him sit on the bed with closed eyes, Magica pondered who Aruto truly was. She had traveled the world tirelessly, seeking someone specific, yet a few days ago, this guy had conveniently joined her. As she observed him, she saw strength beyond his years, and skills she had never encountered. She needed to get closer to investigate further. It seemed he harbored a secret. Magica recalled everything Aruto had said, surprised by his mature demeanor and speech. Could he be the one she sought? The one destined to change this world? The star prediction foretold. The hero would arrive in a girl's body, making it impossible for Aruto to be that hero. Still, as she gazed at him, Magica felt an undeniable premonition. Aruto would become the key to opening the doors of a new world, a feeling she had experienced before. The next moment Aruto was fast asleep, utterly exhausted from his training. Magica, observing him, noted how he collapsed like a dead man. Once his mana reserves were depleted, why does he push himself so hard with training? She wondered, a sense of unease stirring within her. It almost seemed as if someone were chasing him. Someone watched them from the rooftop. A moment later, an intruder attempted to climb through the open window. Magica was surprised, wondering if it was truly a thief. His presence was barely detectable, suggesting a very low level. She could have driven him away, but she wanted to observe how Aruto would handle the situation. So Magica feigned sleep as the thief entered the room. He reached for Aruto, stirring, reached behind him, then awoke and calmly greeted the intruder before him. The thief responded by drawing a knife and attempting to attack Aruto. Magica immediately sprang from her bed, shouting for Aruto to be careful. The knife froze inches from Aruto's throat. As the thief warned, "Don't move." The thief then stated that, if Aruto behaved like an adult, he wouldn't be harmed. Magica and Aruto both demanded to know what the thief wanted. "Did you really want money? How did you even know about this place?" Aruto pressed, leaving the thief speechless. Instead of talking, Aruto attacked the thief. He unleashed an air cannon, striking the intruder. The force of Aruto's blow sent the intruder sprawling out the window. Magica looked at Aruto and asked if he was alright. He replied that everything was in perfect order. Watching where the enemy fell, Magica realized Aruto had used incredibly complex magic. With a seemingly simple movement, such power could easily kill. Magica wondered how much Aruto must have trained to reach such a level at his age. She turned to Aruto to ask him, but he was already fast asleep again. Magica thought this boy was destined for fame in many ways. She noticed the thief's knife lying near Aruto's bed. Later, after waking, the two went down to the tavern and began to eat. As various dishes were brought to them, Aruto asked Magica if she found the food delicious, and if she was enjoying it. With her mouth full, Magica declared it the most delicious food she had ever tasted, her words slightly garbled. Aruto simply told her to eat and not rush. Soon after, they thanked the staff for the meal. They then left the hotel and Magica thanked Aruto, stating she was completely full. Aruto then teasingly promised Magica that by morning, she would have eaten enough for 10 people. Magica then inquired about their next move. Aruto explained that, while he initially planned to visit the dungeon, yesterday's unexpected visitor had changed his mind. He now held the thief's knife, contemplating where else to search. Aruto proceeded to the guild, greeting those seated near the entrance. Again, 2 men watched him. One, the merchant who had bought Aruto's magic stones, recognized him, asking if he was indeed the young man from yesterday. Aruto in response asked, "Are you appraising magic stones today?" The man explained he was speaking with the boss, and asked Aruto to return later if he had business. Aruto replied that this was fortunate timing. He also wished to speak with their superiors, adding, "Could it be that there's a thief in the guild?" The boss, gazing at Aruto, asked for clarification and further details. Aruto explained that a suspicious individual had entered their room the previous day. While they successfully scared him off, the intruder's target was clearly the money from the magic stones sold to the guild. The criminal hadn't rummaged through the room. He knew precisely where the funds were kept. Otherwise, he wouldn't have known to search in Aruto's bag. In other words, Aruto concluded, the robber could only be someone present in the guild. During our transaction, finishing his explanation, Aruto looked at his superiors. The boss acknowledged the high probability of Aruto's deduction. Turning to Lion, who sat directly opposite him, the boss stated that Lion was responsible, and asked if he'd noticed anyone suspicious. Lion replied vaguely, "I wouldn't even know, maybe not." The boss pressed him to speak more clearly. Aruto silently observed the exchange. Finally, Lion reported that he hadn't seen anyone suspicious. Aruto, pointing to Magica, revealed that she had in fact managed to brand the criminal during their encounter. Majika looked surprised by Aruto's words. Aruto then requested that, if the boss noticed a man with a magic sign on his hand, he should be detained at that moment. Lion suddenly lowered his sleeves, handing the dagger to the boss. Aruto mentioned the thief had also dropped it. While a fine weapon, it should be handed over to the gendarmes as evidence. True, it will assist them in the search for the thief, the boss replied, examining the dagger. Suddenly Lion interjected, asking the boss if Aruto could keep the dagger. He argued that rules allowed victors to claim spoils from defeated opponents, and it seemed a shame to part with such a fine weapon. The boss began to agree, but before he could finish, Lion had already approached Aruto. He pressed the dagger into Aruto's hand, extolling its quality, and urging him to guard it carefully, speculating it was quite valuable. Aruto tried to push Lion away, clearly displeased by the turn of events. The boss then insisted on calm transactions, stressing the need for reinforced security. Lion, claiming full understanding, asked the boss to rely on him afterward. Aruto and Majika departed. Majika then stated the person was a thief, questioning was it wise to let him go. Aruto replied that the warnings had been given. The rest is no longer our concern. Majika then asked, was his real goal truly just to acquire a weapon? Aruto looked at Majika, a flicker of confusion. Had she seen right through him? He decided that with this task complete, their adventures truly began. Standing before the dungeon entrance, Aruto gazed up at its towering structure. As he spoke, Majika, following his gaze, admitted she couldn't discern its peak. Aruto explained that this was a legendary labyrinth, one of the world's greatest dungeons, whose vastness, origin, and builders remained a mystery. Upon entering the portal, they found themselves instantly transported to a different location. Aruto clarified that the lower levels span the 1st to the 25th floors. This section was relatively safe, primarily serving as a training ground for novice adventurers. As Aruto explained this, a distinct bellow caught his attention. Suddenly 2 nearby adventurers warned that a monster had escaped from an upper floor. They shouted that his magic wouldn't be enough, urging Aruto to flee. Just then, a gigantic horned rat charged directly at Aruto. Others, seeing a mere child, frantically yelled for him to run faster. Aruto, facing the charging enemy, uttered the word grave. Instantly, the creature plummeted into a gaping hole that appeared in the floor. Aruto realized he had miscalculated. He had overexerted his power and risked harming those around them. Magic appeared down, astonished along with everyone else, who couldn't comprehend the sudden appearance of such a massive hole. While some suspected an earthquake, no tremors were felt. Aruto quickly claimed that the floor had simply collapsed. Seemingly by chance, the chasm was deep enough that he yelled for everyone to be careful. As they scattered, Majika asked, "Why didn't you say that was your doing?" Aruto replied that they wouldn't have believed him. Anyway, it was better to hasten to the upper floors. Starting from the 26th floor, the dungeon reached an intermediate difficulty level, where the true maze was said to begin. Moments later, Majika faced a bear. Aruto watched impressed as she defeated it with a single blow. Sitting beside the carcass, Majika brushed off the compliment, pointing out that Aruto had fought as well. Drawing the blade from his belt, Aruto decided it was time to test it. The system immediately reported a skill increase, Dexterity plus 110. Aruto was thrilled by the boost, realizing the dagger was far more effective than he'd imagined. He mused that a proper skill board would show him his progress visually, rather than simply sensing it, and that this knife would be invaluable when choosing new equipment. Even with such a potent weapon, Aruto knew he couldn't afford to stop. Needed to grow stronger by facing the bears ahead. The monsters on this middle level weren't particularly challenging, so he resolved to seek out more formidable foes. Upon leaving, Aruto declared the upper level was their next destination, and after dispatching their current opponents, they departed. Majika simply observed the bears Aruto had slain. Aruto ventured into a cave, immediately plunging into battle. Demons surged toward him. Aruto was confident he could repel them. Soon the demons were crushed beneath the very stones Aruto had weaponized. Watching them fall, he let out a relieved breath. "We're on the 50th floor," Aruto announced to Majika. "This is where the upper level begins. A high-risk zone where only a select few high-level adventurers can hope to compete. The strength of the monsters will increase with every floor, so we need to level up significantly. While we're still here," he gazed ahead as he spoke. Majika simply watched Aruto, then turned to him, asking why he fought monsters in such a usual manner. Aruto was utterly surprised. Was there an unusual way if she knew a better method? He eagerly asked her to teach him, his eyes sparkling. Magica clarified that she hadn't meant it that way, but rather that the monsters Aruto had just defeated were strong enough to trouble even high-level adventurers. Magica disliked how easily Aruto had dispatched several monsters at once. She couldn't fathom how he possessed such strength. Standing before him, she pressed him for answers. Aruto then countered by asking if she found his fighting style strange. Magica confirmed that it certainly appeared so, from an outsider's perspective, wondering why he seemed so surprised by her observation. In that moment, Aruto realized Magica was the second person to truly perceive him. Before this, only Hana had ever seen beyond his surface. He recalled his past life. Even at level 99, he fought monsters alone, while other high-level adventurers attracted followers. No one had ever even glanced his way. Dismissed due to his low life stat. This was the harsh law of that world. Now Aruto pondered. It seemed there were others besides Hana who defied this very law at that moment. Magica's curiosity piqued, asking if Aruto was in fact entirely human. Smiling, Aruto assured her he was 100% exactly human. He thought to himself that despite his assertion, it was a hard truth to accept, given he had died and been reborn. Observing Aruto and repeating his words, Magica, amused by his smile, settled on the explanation that he was simply peculiar. Aruto bristled at her comment. Moments later, the system announced a level increase, and they continued their descent into the cave. Aruto declared he could now defeat monsters from the 50th floor, and proposed they climb a little higher. Aruto's past life memories told him that a dangerous monster would be lurking here. As if on cue, a small ogre appeared before them. Aruto recalled how much effort it took to defeat this ogre in his past life, now curious about how swiftly he could do it. As they stood before the monster, Magica remarked on the ogre's impatient eagerness to kill, noting its far superior strength compared to previous monsters. Turning to Aruto, she offered to attack from the rear. Aruto refused, declaring he would fight the monster alone. Magica, upon hearing this, worried Aruto was not thinking clearly. A single mistake would mean his death, but saw this as a chance to gauge his true strength. Drawing his knife, he stepped forward to face the ogre. In the next moment, Aruto attacked, striking the ogre with his sword. He found the monster's skin astonishingly thick, like metal, yet he still managed to injure it. The ogre, enraged, retaliated, slashing Aruto's cheek. Dodging a subsequent blow, Aruto reasoned that his attacks were indeed effective. By continually dodging and hitting the same spot as he had been doing, he could eventually defeat the ogre. But as he landed after another strike, Magica exclaimed that couldn't just be. Magica, however, couldn't help but wonder if Aruto had truly defeated this monster with such ease. Aruto, having dried himself off, mused that he hadn't needed to strain himself much. Perhaps this was the current limit of his strength. The slime then deposited a large diamond at his feet. As Aruto examined it, he wondered why a monster of this rank would drop such a significant gem. A sudden shift in the air signaled something new. At that moment, Aruto called out to Magica, asking if she heard it. The girl standing just behind him replied by asking what sound he was referring to. Realizing the danger, Aruto turned to Magica and urged her, "We need to get out of here fast." Magica countered that escape was impossible. Moving even an inch would mean their death. Just then a colossal ogre emerged, directly from the depths of the cave, its massive hand extending towards them. This green ogre was enshrouded in magical ivy, a low-level parasitic monster, known to drain the power of higher-tier creatures. It infects Aruto. Facing the ogre, pondered its presence on the 70th floor. Typical ogres only began to appear 10 floors higher. Aruto wasn't even fully confident he could defeat a smaller opponent. Yet now a massive ogre stood before him. As he placed the slime back into the bag, he glanced at Magica, insisting they seize the opportunity to escape. Magica, however, flatly refused. She recognized the monster's immense power, but believed it had a limit. Activating her gloves, she prepared for battle. She had tirelessly trained to become a worthy partner for the hero she had sought, having long considered herself unrivaled. Yet upon meeting Aruto, she finally understood her past efforts were insufficient. The girl then charged the ogre, resolute in her duty to secure victory, and launched her attack after her strike. Magica saw her attack had barely any effect. The ogre only grew angrier and retaliated against her. dodging the ogre's blows. Magica realized she was faster than it. A single attack would clearly be insufficient. She needed to unleash several simultaneously. Despite her swift, relentless attacks, the ogre struck her with ivy, then seized her its grip, painfully crushing her body. Aruto used an air blade, freeing the girl as the ivy fell away behind her. Bruto asked Magica how she felt. She thanked him, a sense of self-reproach washing over her, for being saved by a child. Magica turned her gaze back to the ogre, reactivating her power. She knew it was time to unleash everything. Invoking light as an untouched shadow, she called upon the radiance of 1,000 heavenly bodies, unleashing the artifact Star Rain. Magica attacked the ogre with all her might, realizing she had expended all her mana on the secret spell. She believed the ogre should have perished, but as the dust dispersed, she saw the ogre standing unharmed. Utterly bewildered, the ogre at that moment was raising its leg directly over Magica. Magica stared up at it, realizing that, despite putting all her strength into the blow, it hadn't been enough. The ogre plummeted into the ground directly beneath it. Aruto moved swiftly to Magica. As she saw Aruto appear before her, he scooped her into his arms, telling her to leave the rest to him as he ran. He then turned to Slime, instructing it to look after Magica. The slime assented and Aruto rejoined the battle. Standing before the ogre, Aruto knew he had to win. Aruto immediately rushed forward, knowing he was no faster than Magica, but considering it nonetheless. The ogre's attack abruptly shattered Aruto's train of thought. Witnessing this, Magica let out a desperate cry, gasping for breath. Aruto instinctively countered the ogre's blow. Aiming to retaliate, Aruto scrutinized his foe, acknowledging that despite its magical nature, the ivy remained vulnerable to fire. However, he knew merely burning the vines would be futile. They would only regenerate. Aruto needed to strike in a way that truly harmed the ogre. Gripping his sword, Aruto launched another assault. He understood that piercing the ogre's thick skin directly was impossible, so he had to aim for a precise weakness. With his target in mind, Aruto unleashed a fireball directly into the ogre's back. Aruto slumped to the ground, observing the impact of his attack. The next moment, Aruto's eyes darkened and he fell to the ground. Magica could only stare at the ogre in shock, amazed as she realized Aruto had won. But Aruto was just a child, yet he had defeated this ogre. These were Magica's last thoughts before she fell unconscious. Opening their eyes, Aruto and Magica found a slime hovering directly above them. The sun was shining as they lay on the ground, wondering how they had gotten there. Aruto questioned if Ru the slime had truly rescued them, to which Ru affirmed it with a unique tongue sound. Hugging the slime, Aruto thanked her, calling her the most reliable companion in the world. Turning to Magica, Aruto pointed out the danger of remaining unconscious. It was fortunate they had recovered where they were. Magica remained silent, then apologized, and declared she would return to the hotel first. Aruto agreed, stating he would also take a break before returning. Aruto stared at Magica, greatly surprised. Could Magica really use an artifact? Artifacts were holy tools created by God, their numbers so few in their world that they could be counted on one's fingers. The artifact Magica used was called Star Rain. Aruto recalled that if his memories from his past life served him correctly, the owner of this artifact would die in 7 years. It was night. Aruto, sitting in the bathtub, realized Magica had possessed an artifact's magic all this time. The artifact, known as the Hand of Justice, designated its wielder as a person possessing 2 specific traits, classified by the Vatican as criminal. Element number 5, Machia ex terra. She and 5 other people were declared enemies of God. While this declaration had not yet occurred, an order for their destruction would be given. In the future, Aruto requested the skill scoreboard, and a system interface appeared before him. Looking at it, Aruto surmised that Magica's life indicator was likely 4 in the dungeon. Aruto had felt her magical energy surpass his own, coupled with an indestructible barrier. She must be incomparably stronger than him. Aruto mused. Clear disparity in their respective standards of living. Aruto then thought, but even she will be ruined by the Vatican. In 7 years, as he sank underwater, Aruto began to grasp the extent of his weakness. Compared to her, could he truly change his fate? Aruto wondered sadly at that moment. Slime appeared before Aruto, who, surprised, surfaced from his bath. He asked what she was already doing there, wondering if she too wanted a bath. The slime responded in its own language, prompting Aruto to get out and begin washing her. Aruto, rubbing Ru with a washcloth, remarked, "This time we only escaped thanks to you." He promised to rub her until she shone, a gesture that delighted the slime. As Aruto rubbed the slime, she replied in her unique language. Aruto couldn't tell if he should stop, as the slime's heels seemed ticklish. A perplexing thought, as he never imagined a slime would have heels. The next moment the slime, sparkling so intensely it almost blinded him, prompted Aruto to ask if she always looked this way. When clean smiling, Aruto looked at Ru and asked if she was happy. Ru jumped with happiness and said something to Aruto. The next moment she blurred, resembling a puddle. Seeing this, Aruto asked if she shouldn't be washed, then gently pushed the slime back into the water. After leaving the monopool and bringing the slime back to his room, Aruto realized he had startled it. Just then Magica appeared. Rising from the sofa, she greeted, "Hello, Aruto." Magica seemed to have something to say, so Aruto decided they should talk outside. As Aruto brought her a drink, he realized she hadn't uttered a word since they returned to the hotel. Had something truly happened? Handing her the drink, Aruto remarked, "The sunset here is beautiful." They both gazed at the sky. Magica quietly agreed, clutching her mug. She sat solemnly before turning to Aruto. She confessed, "I always thought I'd never lose to a magician." She had been so confident no one could match her skill. "Perhaps my training made me too arrogant," he admitted, "but now I realize I was weak. From now on, I want to devote myself to solitary training," Magica declared, looking at Aruto. Magica explained that living alongside Aruto would only aggravate her weakness, so she wanted a separate room. Looking at Aruto, she added, "If I hadn't come with you, I would never have realized this." Then thanked him, she vowed, "Next time I definitely won't lose to you." Turning to Aruto once more, she challenged, "At our next meeting, I'll try to become stronger than you." Hearing this, Aruto's hands trembled and he began to laugh, baffling Magica as to why he found it so amusing. Aruto explained that she was saying very strange things. Then he apologized, realizing it wasn't about talent. It was only the most important thing was to try hard. Clinking mugs, Aruto declared he wasn't going to lose either, and they should meet again, when each of them had grown 100 times stronger. They laughed, rejoicing in their current progress, never imagining that despite their efforts, a power existed in this world that could destroy them in a blink. Back at the hotel, Aruto began to gather his belongings. Checking his bag, he confirmed he had packed everything. He glanced at the bed where Magica had slept, then closed his eyes, leaving the room. He resolved to keep the promise he made to her. From that moment, he lost all track of time, throwing himself entirely into training. First, Aruto decided he needed to develop his crafting skill. Consulting his system, he arrived at a forest, realizing it was a prime training spot. It boasted an abundance of collectible crystals and was rich in mana, a crafting skill. Aruto mused. He began training by generating mana and breaking stones into pieces. Soon he received a skill increase and gained control over magic. He dedicated himself to mining stones. Soon after, his crafting skill reached level 20, unlocking blacksmith as Aruto anticipated. Crafting provided not only offensive abilities, like Grave Reaper, but also the power to create items, utilizing materials from the dungeon, like fire and magic. Naturally, he no longer had to worry about being chased from the forge holding a sword before him. Aruto realized that by training solely with it, he had suddenly acquired a new skill. Moments later, while fighting a powerful monster in a cave, Aruto understood it was too early for him to advance to the next floor. Soon after, the system reported Aruto had acquired the skill Art of the Blade and surpassed level 40. A new skill, two-handed style, unlocked. Seeing this, Aruto drew his sword and wielded it against his opponent. After the battle, his level immediately increased. Aruto realized that by using Grave Reaper, Typhoon, and other attacks, the Grave Reaper's level rose. He combined it with magic, gaining not only control over the created fissures, but also high lethal potential. Throughout this period, Aruto's level rose in tandem with his skills. The system reported Aruto's level was now 40, and all his skills had increased by 30 units. His crafting skill and manipulation were now available. Intrigued, Aruto opened the system window. It described manipulation as absorbing a portion of mana to move an object in a desired direction. Aruto pointed his hand at a stone and activated manipulation. The stone shifted to the side, though not as flashy as Grave Reaper. Aruto believed the skill would also prove useful. He continued to develop the skill. Thus days turned into weeks. Soon winter arrived. Walking through the city, Aruto overheard the townspeople's chatter. He heard something entertaining. Two men were discussing a rumor. Have you heard about the weirdo who recently appeared on the upper floors of the dungeon? He single-handedly defeated 1,000 monsters. The second man admitted he had heard the tales, adding that the weirdo was just a child, and for some reason, he carried a low-level slime everywhere. As Aruto passed them, he realized they were speaking of him. When they saw him, they couldn't believe their eyes. After all, high-level adventurers usually hunted the upper floors. In groups, Naruto silently observed them, realizing his presence was finally being noticed. Before, his low profile meant he went unnoticed, no matter what he achieved. But perhaps something had changed. Though, he certainly didn't appreciate being called a weirdo. Aruto mused, glancing at the strangers. Later at the hotel, Aruto informed the owner that he would be heading back to the dungeon tomorrow, and wished to vacate his room for 2 or 3 days. The owner cautioned Aruto to be careful, then casually asked if the girl, who was previously with him, was alright. Hearing the question, Aruto realized he hadn't seen Magica since they rented separate rooms. The owner then mentioned that the girl hadn't returned for several days, which was starting to worry her. Upon hearing this, Aruto clutched his jacket, initially thinking it's Magica. There's nothing to worry about, but a prickle of discomfort still ran through him. Just then a knight on horseback rode into the city. Everyone who saw him remarked that the Vatican had summoned its knight, finding it quite impressive. Aruto heard this, bolted from the hotel, and the owner called out asking what was wrong. Aruto didn't answer, his mind racing with how the future he remembered was now at odds with reality. Then he understood everything was right. His changes had also affected Magica. But why hadn't he considered that? Aruto's thoughts spiraled. Had the Vatican already ordered Magica's destruction? What if the future, where she was executed, would arrive now? Aruto could only think and pray that Magica was alright. As he ran past a carriage, someone within watched Aruto from the window, musing what a clever boy he is. Approaching the dungeon, Aruto desperately hoped Magica was safe. He activated his sense of presence, reasoning that someone as powerful as her should be easy to locate, and he prayed he wasn't wrong. Spotting a familiar figure, he called out. Magica turned, recognizing Aruto immediately. It's been a long time, she remarked. How are you doing? Acknowledging her strength, and concluding his worries were likely unfounded. Catching his breath, Aruto assured her he was fine, prompting Magica to ask why he was breathing so heavily. Unable to admit his panicked fears for her safety, Aruto feigned a casual jog. He claimed he was merely out for a run, saw her, and stopped to say hello before pretending to continue. Then, removing his scarf, he noted how chilly it was, especially for her attire. He wrapped the scarf around her, urging her to wear it so she wouldn't catch a cold. Magica gratefully accepted. Just then something in the sky drew their gaze. Both looked up, baffled by the sight. Aruto described it as a black mass, and Magica admitted it made her profoundly uneasy. The ominous mass began to expand, its oppressive aura palpable. Aruto instantly recognized the looming danger, and urged Magica to evacuate the nearby citizens. Moments later, the black mass began to crack. Aruto closed his eyes in disbelief. It was a demon standing directly before them, a creature known to control high-ranking monsters. He questioned why it would appear in the heart of the city. The demon immediately began to devastate nearby houses. It was a creature that wouldn't stop attacking until everything around it was reduced to ash. Nothing would deter it. Yet Aruto found himself paralyzed, just as he had been during the fire. The insurmountable difference in their life levels rendered his body numb, his will powerless against the inexorable laws of this world. Despite this, Aruto strained his limbs, desperate to move, knowing the city would be annihilated if he remained frozen. Suddenly, Magica placed the scarf Aruto had given her back onto him. Everything will be fine, she declared. Aruto, you can rely on me. Leaping into action, she charged directly at the demon. Aruto watched intently, struck by Magica's incredible strength. She had grown so much more powerful. As she attacked the demon, she managed to land a blow, but it instantly regenerated. Magica realized that as a demon, he would require a single, overwhelming strike. She prepared to use her artifact, Star Rain, but the demon moved with blinding speed, appearing behind her in an instant. Magica spun around, acknowledging his swiftness, and dodged his subsequent attack. She realized the demon left no opening for her to utilize the artifact. A moment later Aruto saw only shattered pavement. His thoughts consumed by Magica. He couldn't comprehend why he was merely a spectator. Why his last 8 years had been so utterly wasted. He hadn't been reborn, just to witness another catastrophe. A repeat of his past life's collapse. His sheer desire ignited mana within his hands. Staring at the shimmering energy, Aruto wondered if he could manifest magic from his current paralyzed state. If only he could succeed. He looked toward Magica. The demon pressed its attack, and she struggled against the added difficulty of the strong winds. One direct hit, and she would die. She knew with the demon regenerating after each strike, she needed to seize the perfect moment to deploy her artifact. Magica attacked the demon once more, only to be violently thrown back. This was simply unrealistic. She thought even if Aruto was now accumulating mana, he wouldn't be able to intervene in time. The demon conjured a massive fireball. Spinning it overhead, Magica looked at it. Understanding her death was imminent, she closed her eyes, bracing for the end. At that moment Aruto used his manipulation skill. Magica opened her eyes to see the demon's fire attack being carried far away. Aruto stared at the redirected attack, disbelieving. Magica wondered if he had truly altered the attack's trajectory just then. The demon lost its balance. Magica looked at Aruto, realizing he was a young man. As the demon fell right on Magica, she saw her chance to attack. Aruto shouted to her, use Star Rain. He attacked the demon, wounding it until it disappeared. Witnessing its disappearance, Aruto and Magica both believed they had succeeded. Magica ran up to Aruto, asking if he was okay, helping him up. Aruto explained he was just weak from the level up, and that a short rest would restore his strength. As she put Aruto on her back, he didn't understand what Magica was doing. She insisted on taking him to the hotel. Aruto asked her not to, but she countered that he had already done so much for her, and pleaded to be allowed to do at least this later. As they fled, Magica mentioned she had never seen a technique like his before. Realizing Magica referred to his manipulation skill, Aruto explained he had acquired it since their last encounter. He demonstrated by manipulating his scarf, making it instantly appear on Magica. Magica, seeing this, asked if he had done that. Aruto replied that he could move objects at will, using mana. Thus he could change the direction of wind attacks, block and redirect offenses. And with training, one could control opponents like puppets. Magica declared it an incredible skill. Aruto, however, explained that he couldn't move while using it, and would never have defeated the demon alone. He then credited Magica with saving the city. Addressing her directly, blushing, Magica said she thought they both tried. Aruto chuckled in response. A thought struck Aruto as he recalled the demon's last defeat. If these incidents continued, the city would be obliterated. He realized he didn't recall hearing about such an event before, which meant someone must have defeated it. Who could be strong enough to defeat such a demon? Aruto pondered just then. He sensed an aura and asked Magica to stop. As they ran across the rooftop, Magica, turning to Aruto, said they hadn't reached their destination yet, but Aruto insisted they stop now. Suddenly Magica stopped, halting mid-stride on the roof. Aruto looked down and immediately recognized the figure. His black clothes, oppressive mana radiating from him, as if he wasn't from this world. This was the magician who had killed Hana in a previous life. The man standing directly before Aruto was Gamajin, who stood there looking away. Magica looked at Aruto, noticing he looked disturbed, a look she'd never seen before. She asked who the man was. Aruto replied that it was Gamagon Salzwai, one of the 12 commanders of Euphonia. Hearing this, Magica thought that even she had heard of him, for Gamagon was known as the strongest magician in the world. As she pondered this, Aruto began to gather his magic, prompting Magica to ask what he was doing. In a fit of anger, Aruto stated it didn't concern her, for he had to kill this magician. Magica stopped Aruto, asking if he truly intended to fight in such a state. Aruto was already looking at Magica, who grabbed his hand and told him he was too weak after his level up, and would be no match for this magician. Aruto only asked her to let go. Magica in turn urged Aruto to calm down and sit. Didn't he understand he couldn't win now? She shouted, trying to reason with him. Aruto calmed down, realizing Magica was right. In his current state, he couldn't defeat the magician. Leaning on the rooftop, Aruto felt a wave of depression. Meanwhile, the magician stood observing his invention. A man beside him then asked what it meant, that he had summoned the demon, and if he, Mr. Gamajin, was indeed responsible. Gamajin replied that it was true. He had acquired a rare summoning artifact, and simply wanted to test it, but it proved useless. The artifact could only summon a low-ranking ogre. Breaking the artifact in his hands, he stated, "Unfortunately, before I had a chance to intervene, someone had already defeated it without difficulty." The man behind the magician pointed out that the strength of even such a weak demon was enough to destroy a small state. The 12 commanders of Euphonia obey only royal orders. Their duty is to protect the country. Such an act is simply unacceptable. At this moment, Gamajin looked at the man, lifted him, and bound his neck with magic. Gamajin asked the suspended man why. He felt the need to voice his opinions on such matters. Surely he hadn't considered it might be in his best interest to keep his opinions to himself. Gasping for air, the man apologized profusely. The young man plummeted to the ground. The magician then ordered his carriage, declaring his intent to return to the capital and continue his research. At that moment, a subordinate addressed Gamajin, asking if he still hadn't found the one he sought, and if he truly intended to leave things as they were. Gamajin replied that the person wasn't in the city. As he entered his carriage, he mused that upon seeing Aruto and Magica, he believed Makia would unleash terror. He hadn't expected to find one of the Vatican's enemies. In such a place, Aruto and Magica were struck with horror by the man's gaze. The magician, meanwhile, speculated that Makia must have been the one who defeated the demon. Deeming her strong, he envisioned acquiring wonderful ingredients from her body parts. Gamajin considered what he could do with the girl then, but halted his thoughts, realizing no orders for her destruction had yet been given. Going against the king would jeopardize support for his experiments. A risk too great to take, the magician concluded. Thus he instructed his coachman to depart, confident they would encounter the girl again. As the magician's carriage departed, Aruto and Magica watched it go, realizing how deeply the magician's stare had unsettled them. Magica voiced her fear that he would surely kill them. She then recalled he was a commander from Euphemia, and looking at Aruto, asked how he was. Aruto gazed at the floor, musing on his own foolishness, forever believing he could fight such a monstrous magician. Vowing to himself, he resolved to be stronger than Gamajin. When they next met a few days later, the Lord of Canotagris expressed a desire to publicly thank Magica for exorcising the demon. Magica refused, however, asking if they had forgotten about Aruto. The officials, however, were unwilling to acknowledge that someone of Aruto's low social standing could possess such power. After that, the lords seemed to give up. As they walked through the city, Aruto questioned Magica, asking if she truly didn't want the recognition. Was she certain they discussed this? Magica, confident in her stance, expressed her frustration that no one wanted to acknowledge Aruto's power. Aruto replied that nothing could be done, as in their world, everything was decided by one standard of living. Smiling and looking at Magica, he silently reflected that only she and Hana seemed to ignore this societal rule. He then advised Magica that rather than worrying, she should devote herself to training. Magica, hearing Aruto speak with such conviction, wondered if everything was truly all right with him. Aruto mentioned he was thinking of dropping into the dungeon again tomorrow. At that moment, they passed by a man who was watching them carefully. Aruto stopped and turned to him. Magica asked what had caught his attention. He replied that the man's face seemed familiar. Aruto saw the same man who worked in the guild, now sitting on the asphalt. It was Lion, holding a sign that read "Needed warmth and affection." Lion, seeing Aruto, a guild employee, was surprised and immediately recognized him. He shouted, "It's you, don't you remember me?" Aruto, clearly showing his dislike for Lion, claimed he had never seen him before. Lion, of course, didn't believe Aruto, stating his face was unforgettable. He explained his dire situation, hinting that financial support would be greatly appreciated. Aruto and Magica simply walked past. Aruto, turning to Magica, inquired about the dungeon floor she was training on, deliberately ignoring Lion. Suddenly Lion threw himself at Aruto's feet, pleading for money. Exasperated, Aruto tried to shake him off, demanding to know why he was so persistent, and if he had no shame begging strangers for money. Undeterred, Lion addressed Aruto and Magica, declaring his belief in their potential. They remained silent, simply staring at him. Lion, pointing to himself, then proposed they form an adventuring party. he offered a fresh start, formally introducing himself as Lion to Aruto and Magica as an adventurer himself. He proposed they work together. Another pair of hands always comes in handy in battle. Besides, he added, asking them not to be surprised. I'm a hero, it's a mega rare profession. Aruto, smiling thinly, told Lion he didn't agree with the proposal. Lion couldn't understand Aruto's objection. Aruto mused that while a hero was rare, he doubted Lion would be useful. Magica yawned behind Aruto as Lion, still kneeling, pleaded for Aruto to reconsider. I even left the guild specifically for this, Lion said. Aruto, hearing this, retorted, more likely you were caught red-handed and kicked out. Lion gaped, unable to comprehend how Aruto had seen through him so easily, then realized he had undeniably messed up. Aruto sighed, explaining that this exact reason was why he preferred earning money by hunting in dungeons. Suddenly Lion was practically jumping on Aruto again, begging to be taken into their party. Magica finally lost her patience. She handed Lion half a loaf of bread and told him he was getting on everyone's nerves. Lion dropped to the ground, slumping behind them as Aruto and Magica walked away, conversing quietly. Magica informed Aruto that she was hungry. Aruto replied that he had recently discovered a good place and offered to take her there. A few days later, deep in a dungeon, Aruto battled numerous foes. After defeating them, his level rose to 42, and his passive blade skill increased to 43. He noted that the blade he had forged was proving to be exceptionally good. Even after several more days, Lion hadn't stopped chasing Aruto. Aruto, however, was already considering ascending to a higher floor. Suddenly, Aruto heard frantic shouts and the sound of running. Lion burst into view, pursued by a pack of wolves screaming for help. Aruto was utterly surprised to see Lion there. Lion immediately begged Aruto to get rid of the pursuing wolves. Aruto then used his magic, telling Lion to duck, before unleashing a burst of flame upon the attacking wolves. Witnessing the display, Lion exclaimed, "That was incredibly cool." Aruto rushed over to Lion, who was already on his knees, profusely thanking Aruto for the rescue. Lion explained he had been following Aruto and inadvertently found himself on the upper levels. Aruto chastised him, "Beginners have no place here." Lion reiterated his desire to form a team with Aruto and Magica. Aruto, exasperated, demanded to know how many more times he had to repeat that Lion would only get in the way. Aruto stated he didn't have time to mess with him. Still on his knees, Lion quietly apologized to Aruto. Aruto, turning away, told him if he understood, he should have returned sooner. Just then a wolf lunged at Lion. Aruto, seeing this, swiftly attacked the wolf directly in front of him, then turned to the wounded Lion, asking if he was alive. Aruto, kneeling beside him, found himself unable to believe what he saw. He was plagued by the thought that this was Aruto's fault. If Aruto had accepted Lion, he mused, this wouldn't have happened, as Lion lay wounded on the ground. As soon as Lion heard Aruto's words, he instantly sprang up, asking if it was true that Aruto might accept him. Startled Aruto, still asking if Lion was alive, watched as Lion rubbed his neck and casually admitted he hadn't mentioned it, but he was a vampire. Aruto was utterly stunned by this revelation. Vampires, a race often said to possess immortality, are known to hunt under the cover of night. Humans fear them as much as any monster. But Aruto, pointing at Lion, asked if these claims were true. Lion replied that vampires were not so different from humans, explaining that the horror stories were human fabrications. Their bodies, he clarified, were similar to human ones, though serious wounds could be just as fatal. Lion then explained to Aruto that he was special and invulnerable. Hearing this, Aruto wondered if this invulnerability meant he possessed the ability to regenerate. Aruto then asked how Lion sustained his injury. Lion replied it was a long story, adding that he also possessed high pain resistance. Aruto pressed him to tell the story and inquired if such an ability could be acquired. Lion explained that no one, regardless of race, could simply earn this ability, nor did he acquire it through his own efforts. He added that if he told Aruto, he wouldn't believe him. Lion then revealed he wasn't from this world. Aruto was astonished. Lion explained that he once lived in another world, Japan, as an ordinary person. He died in an accident, but was reborn in euphony. During his final moments, a terrifying fear consumed him. Lion desperately prayed not to die, only to awaken in a new world, inhabiting a body that knew no fear of death. Hearing Lion's story, Aruto mused that others must have experienced similar rebirths. Lion then clarified that his pain resistance hadn't appeared immediately. he gained this ability in the early years of his new life. At first, this new world seemed a dream come true. A vampire race, a body immune to the fear of death, and even the profession of a hero. Lion felt like the protagonist of some grand tale. However, that feeling evaporated a few years later. A vampire hunt began in Fortinia, driven by the teachings of the church, and Lion witnessed his parents' brutal murder. As he couldn't be killed, they seized him and brought him to the church as a heretic. There, in the name of divine justice, endless commenced. Lion's body wouldn't die, yet he felt every ounce of pain. Daily suffering made him long for death as his greatest salvation. Despite his agony, he remained alive. 50 years later, his pain threshold finally shattered. He could no longer feel a single drop of pain. Lion recalled this as he stood upon a blazing bonfire. Seizing that moment, Lion made his escape. He ran for centuries, constantly hiding his true identity. Eventually, he arrived in Kanotagras and found work in the guild. After recounting his dramatic movie-like tale, Lion stood before Aruto and told him that he would not be able to acquire the same skill. Listening to the horrific story, Aruto could barely believe the immense suffering Lion had endured. I apologized for making him relive such painful memories. Lion smiled and reassured Aruto not to dwell on it, stating those days were long past. Still, Lion confessed to one lingering regret. If only he had been strong enough, he could have protected his family. That was his sole lament. Aruto recalled memories from his past life. Lion explained that he joined the guild, not only to earn money, but also to grow stronger. He asked Aruto again if he would form a team with him, but Aruto simply turned away and left. Lion observed Aruto silently, deeming him useless. Aruto then challenged Lion, asking how long he planned to stand there. He urged Lion to join him soon, questioning if he feared the intensity of Aruto's training. Lion beamed with joy upon hearing about the training, declaring his delight. Aruto, watching Lion play with slime, realized that while he couldn't fully grasp the hardships of an immortal life, the fundamental desire to protect loved ones resonated deeply with him, and he couldn't simply abandon someone like Lion. Thus began their training. Aruto resumed battling opponents, honing his skills with the power of the Grave Reaper. Soon after, enemies Aruto had previously fought attacked Lion nearby, and Lion cried out for his teacher's help. Aruto realized the sheer number of opponents, and that Lion needed to stop fighting like a mere human. As Aruto decimated monsters, Lion shielded his head from the chaotic attacks. Aruto advised Lion that, while thinking through attacks was important, as a vampire with superior strength, he first needed to unleash his full power. Without hesitation, Aruto handed Lion a sword, and Lion, agreeing with Aruto, immediately engaged the opponents. After striking them down, Lion turned to Aruto, acknowledging him as his teacher, and admitting Aruto was right. It was then that Aruto witnessed Lion's true strength. As Lion swung his sword, Aruto inquired about his strength and standard of living. Lion replied, stating his level was 4. Aruto realized this level matched Magicus. From then on, Aruto's sole focus was training Lion. They continued to improve their skills. Lion's level or life increased at a terrifying pace. Initially, he fought somewhat clumsily, but quickly surpassed Aruto. They tackled dungeons at a speed Aruto had never imagined possible. Every 10 floors, Magica joined them to defeat the area boss. Floors flew by quickly. Upon defeating a particularly formidable monster, Lion confidently told his teacher that their dungeon clear time would be legendary. Magica had never imagined they would one day defeat the 90th floor boss. 6 years later, Aruto stood over the fallen boss. He turned to Magica and Lion, thanking them for their unwavering support. His goal was the 100th floor, but time was rapidly running out. He declared that from this moment, the game would shift to an entirely new level. Hana's death was now only a year away. Shortly after, Aruto gathered his belongings and departed. The owners then inquired if Aruto was truly departing. Aruto confirmed his departure and thanked her for her hospitality. The girl then asked where Aruto planned to go, admitting she would feel lonely without him. Aruto revealed his intention to attend a particular school in Euphonia's capital. Just then, Magica and Lion rushed down the stairs towards Aruto. Lion, addressing Aruto, questioned if he was truly departing the city. Magica, standing beside Aruto, expressed her surprise, having heard nothing of his plans until now. Aruto intended to leave alone. Aruto then looked at his friends, who immediately questioned why he hadn't told them anything. Aruto simply replied that he had intended to say his goodbyes. Aruto reflected that Hana's death was now only a year away. His full focus had to be on protecting her. A confrontation with Gamajin was inevitable. This battle might demand his life, and he refused to endanger any innocent people. Observing Aruto, Wyan remarked that he likely had his own reasons. Stepping forward, Magica declared she would accompany him, explaining that she still hadn't repaid Aruto for all he'd done for her 6 years prior. She added that Magica wouldn't permit Aruto to escape when he had come so far. Wyan, embracing Aruto, confirmed that he would of course join them, stating that students always follow in their teacher's footsteps. For these past 6 years, no young man had become stronger. Magica then added that should anything happen, they would come to Aruto's rescue. Naruto, surprised at first, then laughed, realizing he had no choice but to offer for them all to go together. With that, they boarded the carriage and set off. As they traveled through the mountains, Wyan sat in the carriage yawning and gazing ahead, complaining of boredom. They had been driving for 4 days. He wondered, and where were they even headed? Aruto replied that once they descended the mountain, Wyan would see everything for himself. If he had nothing else to do, he could join Aruto. Aruto was speaking about his training, specifically concentrating mana. At that moment, Magica sat beside him. Observing Aruto, upon hearing Aruto's offer, Wyan declined thanking him, and remarking that only Aruto could train effectively just by sitting still. Magica then asked Aruto what their plan was. Upon arriving in Euphonia, Aruto revealed his intention to enroll in school, specifically mentioning the Royal Courts Institution as one of the country's finest and most exclusive. Wyan, surprised by this news, questioned Aruto's seriousness about studying and its necessity. Aruto, however, remained silent. Suddenly, the carriage jolted, nearly throwing Wyan out with a shout. Aruto and Magica exchanged surprised glances, observing their coachman, who then announced that a wheel had become stuck in a rut. He would attempt to free it, but warned they might not be able to continue. Magica turned to Aruto, asking what they should do. Aruto buried his face in his hands. Standing up, he looked at Magica and stated there was no other option. They would have to walk. Wyan interjected, assuring Aruto that wouldn't be necessary, and that Aruto should rely on him instead. Moments later, the driver questioned if Aruto could pull out the wheel. Wyan, unfurling his belt, dismissed the idea. He declared the driver's help was no longer needed, instructing him to leave the cart and return with the horse alone. Without hesitation, Wyan lifted the entire massive section of land on which the cart rested and began running with it through the mountains. He imagined this unconventional transport to be more heroic, yet he was also eager to cover ground. Quickly placing the cart back on the ground, Wyan turned to the teacher, asking if his efforts were satisfactory. The teacher, looking inside, saw Magica and Aruto sprawled atop each other, and she remarked that such immense force should have been accounted for. Aruto, clearly annoyed, called Wyan over, threatening to leave him behind next time if he pulled a stunt like that again. Wyan sat nursing a bump on his head. He mused that Aruto would surely appreciate their faster pace. Glancing back at the path they'd covered, confident they had indeed saved considerable time, soon the capital of Euphonia stretched before them. Aruto instructed Magica and Wyan to handle the luggage, while he forged ahead, leaping out. Aruto sprinted towards the city gates. As Aruto ran, his thoughts fixated on Hana. She was here, so close. His dear, unique Hana. He reflected on their shared past, which compelled him toward the royal school. Even if they weren't destined to be lovers again, in this life he yearned to see her now. Meanwhile, Hana stood in the middle of a street. A woman beside her asked why she seemed so startled. Anna explained that her heart had suddenly begun to pound, a sensation akin to the long-sought person being incredibly near. She had never felt anything like it before. The woman responded, "Who knows? Perhaps the person destiny intends for you is somewhere close by." Intrigued by the idea of a fated person, Hana asked who he might be. The woman admitted she couldn't know, but assured Hana not to worry. The moment she met him, everything would become clear. Hana questioned how she would recognize someone she didn't know at all, but such were the arrangements of human destiny. At that very moment, Aruto emerged from a tunnel into the city, standing incredibly close to her. Lion and Magica also entered the city. Lion surveyed the city, remarking on how it resembled a capital, a city fit for Aruto, whom they had just caught up with, inquired what Lion meant. Lion then explained that in his world, such grand cities always offered work for heroes. Aruto was momentarily speechless, but explained that this city, the heart of the kingdom, housed 3 million people, pointing towards the castle. Aruto directed Lion's gaze towards the royal castle, pointing out the surrounding administrative bodies. Residences of the highest aristocracy lined the streets, and an imposing state church of Fortimus stood opposite the castle. He emphasized the need for discretion, given the city's influential residents. Moments later, Lion spotted Fortumas within the church, and declared his strong aversion to approaching her. After checking into a hotel, Aruto inquired what Majika and Lion planned to do, as he intended to begin preparing for the royal school's entrance exams. Lion expressed surprise at the existence of an entrance exam. Aruto clarified that it was only natural, given the school's reputation as the best in the country. The city boasted a guild and a dungeon, albeit smaller than those in Kinodagra's. Aruto mused that finding adventure shouldn't be an issue for them. Aruto informed them he'd shared his lodging details, urging them to call if they needed anything. Lion confirmed everything was fine. After exchanging glances with Majika, they left Aruto alone. As Aruto approached the Royal Court School for its admission campaign, he considered the sheer number of applicants this year. 10,000 hopefuls vie for just 100 spots. Finding Hana among such a crowd felt like searching for a needle in a haystack. Aruto mused, deciding to look around inside while he had the chance. Soon passed a bench that caught his eye, triggering a memory from his past life. It was a spot he and Hana frequently shared. 70 years had passed, Aruto realized, and he resolved that if he succeeded, he would surely find her. Suddenly, something caught Aruto's eye. He saw Lion pleading with an admissions committee member, asking if she could turn a blind eye. The girl, however, explained that she couldn't. Aruto then questioned Lion and Majika about their presence. Lion spotted Aruto and turned to the teacher. Majika claimed they were there to test their strength and take the exam. Lion immediately countered, revealing she wasn't truthful. Majika's real goal was simply to get Aruto into the school. Majika promptly struck Lion, ordering him to be silent. From the ground, Lion demanded to know why Majika was hitting him so hard. Standing, she retorted that if she had used all her strength, Aruto wouldn't have been able to get up at all. An admissions committee member then addressed Aruto, asking about the exam fee. Hearing this, Aruto looked genuinely surprised by the requirement. The Lion, still on the ground, explained they lacked sufficient funds and had attempted to negotiate. Aruto immediately asked, "What happened to the money you'd accumulated?" Majika revealed Lion had disappointed them, spending all their savings on expensive food while they were touring the elite district. Aruto began to admonish them for their actions in his absence, but a new voice interrupted, declaring the students this year to be exceptionally noisy. Suddenly, a gust of wind magic enveloped the group, leaving them disoriented. A man materialized before them, proclaiming the school to be a place of rich history and noble traditions, not for uncivilized provincials. Aruto recognized Doicha. Lion boldly challenged, "Who is this anyway?" He continued, pointing out the hypocrisy. The man who called them uncivilized provincials had just thrown magic at them. "If he's looking for a fight," Lion declared, clenching his fist. Already poised, Aruto quickly intervened, urging Lion to calm down. This was a school professor, and causing trouble would negatively impact their exam results. Aruto privately reflected on Deutsch's character. He had always been fixated on a student's social status and living standards. The professor then inquired about their origins, noting their non-noble appearance. But then, seeing Aruto, he directly addressed him. "Are you truly planning to take our exam with only a first level of life?" Aruto gazed back, surprised by the direct confrontation. Deutsche dismissed the matter, telling Aruto he should simply return home. His chances of passing were 0, and he'd only pay the entrance fee. In vain glancing at Majika and Lion, Deutsche added that he didn't believe Aruto's companions stood a chance either. Aruto, however, silently concluded that Deutsche had left him no choice, mentally thanking him for his concern. Placing a bag of money down to cover the entrance fee, Aruto then declared he would indeed enroll and prove himself, not with words, but with his exam results. He firmly believed that this school, despite Deutsche's prejudices, was staffed by those who judged students solely on their merits. Aruto turned and left. Deutsche watched the departing trio. Aruto's arrogance, he mused, was astounding. Aruto with only a first level of life, truly believed himself to be something extraordinary. If so, Deutsche decided, he genuinely wanted to witness what Aruto was truly capable of. With that thought, he also departed in the opposite direction. The exam consisted of 2 stages, a written test before lunch, and a practical one afterward. Students first gathered in the classroom for the written portion. Aruto's task involved calculating departure times for 3 detachments, a mounted one at 10 km each, a foot detachment at 4 km range, and an equipment detachment at 2 km range, ensuring all 3 arrived simultaneously at a destination 30 km away. Aruto, working through the problem, glanced at Lion, wondering if he was alright, as the young man visibly struggled. He then observed Majika, who seemed to be handling it with ease, clearly a result of her diligent preparation. Aruto realized he couldn't afford to relax either. Moments later, Deutsche appeared directly in front of Aruto, contemplating the futility of a mere level 1. Trying to pass, he mused that written results alone wouldn't suffice, and there would be no leniency in the practical portion, which he himself would oversee. Tapping his cane on the floor, Deutsche announced it was time to begin the practical exam. He addressed the students, explaining their task was to destroy the cube positioned before him. Deutsche warned them they could use any methods, but it would be far from easy. From the podium, our heroes watched the unfolding events intently. Following Deutsche's instruction, students took turns attempting to break the cube, each failing to make any progress. Despite every attempt, the cube remained unyielding, and scribbled in his notebook, "Another year full of weaklings." Deutsche, noting that no one had passed yet, muttered, "Who could possibly break this damn enhanced magic?" Then Magica stepped onto the field with Lion, enthusiastically shouting encouragement for her to show off. She simply told him to quiet down. Deutsche recognized Magica as the squirrel who had caused a ruckus in the admissions office. Her name, he mused, sounded familiar no matter. He thought she's just a beast man, likely relying on brute force. But reinforced magic is top tier. It's impossible to destroy with mere effort. With a half-serious attack, Deutsche stated Magica then lifted the cube, swiftly deciphering its hidden mechanisms. With a precise strike, she cracked it, then shattered it completely. The crowd erupted in applause, standing and cheering Magica for splitting the cube and doing a great job. Deutsche, witnessing this, struggled to comprehend the attack. It wasn't merely a punch of incredible speed and accuracy. Examining the shattered cube and replaying the attack in his mind, he realized she had landed numerous blows on the exact same spot. A sudden memory struck him. Magica Estate Terra, the same Magica, designated by the Vatican as a risk factor. Why did this beast man come to school? He wondered aloud, then declared the girl passed. Next up was Lion, approaching the cube. He confidently stated, "I'm next." Deutsche, observing him, dismissed him as a simple fool, certainly not a designated risk factor. Lion then brought a sphere directly over the cube, warning everyone to prepare. In an instant, everything was obliterated. Deutsche, shielding his eyes with his staff, struggled to comprehend the scene. Amidst the cube's million shattered fragments, Lion casually asked, "Was that normal?" Deutsche, still reeling in shock, stared at the young man. In all his years of proctoring exams, he had never witnessed such utter destruction of the cube. Then, bristling with anger, Deutsche declared the guy passed. Lion, leaning towards Deutsche, affirmed his passing and expressed relief that the teacher hadn't been hurt. Deutsche, visibly distressed, announced the next examinee, though his expression conveyed a desperate need for a break. To recover suddenly, the testing grounds were restored. Deutsche was utterly bewildered by how these self-taught students, one of Vatican-designated risk factor, had managed to decimate the entire exam site. There were never such results, which exclaimed to all the professors. Reporting the unprecedented outcome, the admissions committee expressed concerns about the new applicants. "Are we truly certain about enrolling them?" one asked another professor. Highlighted their 4th level abilities, suggesting if they join the Euphonia army, they will bring glory to our school. However, a different voice argued that their issues were clear. All eyes turned to Deutsche, awaiting his decision. He acknowledged their behavioral problems, but countered, "We don't get students with a 4th standard of living every day." The professors were convinced if Deutsche guides them, they will become excellent students. Given Deutsche's insistence, they agreed to accept the new students. Deutsche, reviewing the roster, identified a single problematic student, Aruto. Despite his previous success, Aruto was a dropout with a 1st standard of living and by regulation should be rejected. A grim premonition settled over Deutsche. If Aruto passed, it would forever tarnish the school's reputation. Deutsche then performed Elo's spell in Cuba. He resolved to reject Aruto no matter the cost. Placing a reinforced cube on the stage before everyone, he announced the completion of restoration work and the resumption of exams, internally vowing to prevent any first-class students from enrolling. The cube was enchanted with reinforcing magic, augmented by Alo's absorption, making it stronger with every applied force. Deutsche believed even a practitioner of powerful magic would struggle to destroy it, and so he signaled the start of the next trial. The next student to step onto the stage was an Aruto, causing Deutsche to internally curse. He had expected Aruto next. There had been 3 students previously. This young man had not approached the desk with them. Deutsche, skeptical that the current contestant could pass, simply instructed him to begin. The student launched his attack on the cube. Watching, Deutsche pondered, are all students of this level like this? This young man has no mana control at all. Why was I so concerned about Aruto, when this one is far worse? At that moment Deutsche declared the student had failed. But then the cube began to transform. Deutsche watched, bewildered as energy erupted from the cube, followed by a torrent of red mana. He stumbled, unable to comprehend the unfolding chaos. Everyone stared down, confused by the spectacle below. There was talk among the onlookers about how impressive the previous student had been. But the situation at hand was far more critical. The mana was rampaging from the stands. Aruto descended, ordering everyone to evacuate, declaring he would stop the mana. As Aruto made his way down, a powerful whirlwind coalesced before him. He realized the mana wasn't just raging. Something far more profound was happening. At that moment Aruto observed Deutsche, struggling against the immense pressure, realizing even his protective magic wouldn't hold. If Aruto wasn't careful, the situation would quickly spiral into disaster. Deutsche moved to assist the student, realizing his own magic was completely depleted. If the chaos continued, injuries were inevitable. Trapped within the whirlwind, Deutsche deployed a magic shield, but it rapidly faltered. He couldn't sustain it. Then Aruto utilized his unique ability to calm the tempestuous winds. Deutsche watched, utterly astonished. Aruto approached them, asking if everyone was all right. Deutsche then asked Aruto, "How are you?" "I acted as instructed." Aruto replied, "It didn't matter what. You needed to deploy shields and ensure safety. I would handle the outburst," he ordered. Deutsche admonished Aruto not to speak nonsense, asserting that even he was capable of handling such a situation. Aruto merely met his gaze. The teacher warned that the cube was now incredibly dangerous. Even the slightest movement risked an explosion. Aruto stretched out his hand towards the cube, channeling his energy to halt its volatile reaction. Deutsche watched astounded, wondering how Aruto neutralized the mana. Though injured, Aruto focused on the cube, successfully bringing its energy to a standstill, carefully taking it into his hands. It seems Alos was imposed on this cube, Aruto remarked. Aruto explained that, since this school exclusively enrolled students with strong magical abilities, the teacher might not be aware that this particular spell only activates with very weak magic, possessing a unique effect that makes it extremely feeble. Deutsche then looked at Aruto, asking who he was. The teacher mused that Aruto, as he had suspected, a half-educated man with the first standard of living. He realized that even someone of such modest background could achieve anything if they worked tirelessly. Suddenly the cube, having fully radiated its energy, shattered. Deutsche declared that Aruto had passed the exam. Subsequently, everyone congratulated the successful examinees. Later, in a store, they tried on their court school uniforms. The seller congratulated them on successfully passing the exam, and Aruto and his companions, dressed in their new attire, looked remarkably striking. Lion, adjusting his new clothes, commented that he had never worn anything so luxurious before. Aruto, addressing Lion, commented on how well the new outfit suited him, particularly Lion. When Lion didn't respond, he eventually turned to Aruto, asking for clarification. At that moment, Magica joined them, inquiring if there wasn't anything more comfortable. She was dressed in a uniform with a skirt, explaining that such an outfit would hinder her movement, and her feet were freezing. Upon seeing her, the guys immediately remarked how well the attire suited her, making her look like a true aristocrat. Lion, looking at Magica, quipped with a proverb. A stump looks good in a headdress. Majika promptly hit him on the head, retorting that he hadn't been given permission to speak. With that, they proceeded to choose the uniforms together. The seller then asked if there had been any problems with their measurements. The group affirmed that everything was perfect. Handing them a form, the seller explained that the tailoring would take no more than 2 weeks and cost 10 gold per person. Upon seeing the cost, the group seemed perplexed, unsure if they genuinely had to pay for their new clothes. Aruto, noticing their reaction, turned to them and asked what was wrong. Lion retorted that 10 gold coins could sustain someone for half a year, emphasizing that this was just clothes. Aruto then understood that his companions also had no money and stated he would pay for them, acknowledging there was no other option. Majika immediately interjected, stating that wasn't acceptable, as Aruto was already covering their exam fee. The group then approached the seller, asking if payment could be made upon receipt, and he readily confirmed that arrangement was possible. Then, effectively whisking Aruto along, they decided to head straight to the guild in search of the most profitable tasks. Aruto, bewildered, questioned if he was truly being dragged into this. As well, Lion explained that as their mentor, Aruto couldn't possibly abandon his students in trouble. Thus they arrived at the guild and scanned the bulletin board for assignments. They found requests for goblin extermination, offering 12 copper coins, and defeating a giant sewer rat for 20 silver. Lion mused, these requests don't pay much. At this rate, we won't accumulate 10 gold coins in 2 weeks, even though there are quite a few tasks available. Before reaching the royal capital, suddenly, Lion spotted a promising task with a 30 gold reward. Aruto, glancing at Lion, questioned the significant payment and the nature of the task. Upon reading, Lion revealed it required subduing a fire dragon inhabiting the northern mountains. Aruto immediately declared the task impossible. Everyone, surprised, pressed him for a reason. Aruto explained that dragons were legendary creatures, survivors of the War of the Gods, 150 years prior. Nearly one appearing, he stated, could unleash a catastrophe, capable of destroying an entire country. Hearing of such a catastrophe, Majika wondered if such monsters truly existed in this world. Aruto clarified that while they didn't appear often, they certainly did exist in a previous life. He had once encountered and even fought a dragon. But even at level 99, his only option was to escape. Lion then asked Aruto if the danger was truly so immense. He stated if that's the case, 30 gold coins is a ridiculous price. While certainly high, it's incommensurable with the risk. As a former guild employee, I'd say 1,000 gold coins would be more appropriate. Aruto realized Lion's assessment was correct. Majika turned to Lion, questioning if the request might be disinformation. Lion, still holding the paper, replied that if it were the supervisory committee, would have already removed the advertisement. They are very strict about disinformation here, he added. Aruto realized this was his chance to alter history. There's something hidden within this request, he mused. Aruto, now intrigued, told the group he was growing curious and felt they should accept the request. Lion, as he departed, affirmed he would handle all arrangements. Aruto stressed that encountering a dragon was exceedingly rare, necessitating proper preparation. Unbeknownst to them, someone was watching their conversation. A week later, the group once again found themselves battling monsters. Majika, perched atop a massive boar, voiced her frustration. No matter how much we search, we only encounter minor creatures. Perhaps the task truly was a deception. Lions, scanning their surroundings, dismissed the possibility. Aruto, approaching the already defeated monster, noted the fading light and suggested they set up camp. After setting up camp, the companions lit a fire and began to eat. Lion praised the delicious food, adding that eating together remained the best part of their journey. Aruto, examining a piece of slime in his hands, commented that selling their collected materials and magic stones would cover the cost of their uniforms. He regretted that they hadn't encountered the dragon, but concluded that they should return to Euphemia tomorrow morning. As Majika ate her food, she expressed how much she would miss their joint adventures. Aruto confirmed her sentiments, saying he would miss them too. But that night he had something he wished to give them. His companions inquired what it was. Aruto then produced pendants he had crafted, using his blacksmithing skills, infusing them with all his strength, and handed one to each of them. Majika, holding her pendant, felt a mysterious force, both gentle and profoundly strong. Naruto reflected that he had initially assumed he would always be alone. Yet now they sat together around a campfire, He had never imagined such warmth in his future. Thus these pendants served as his way of expressing gratitude. Aruto, smiling, thanked his friends after dinner. The companions drifted off to sleep. Aruto's eyes snapped open, finding the heat unbearable and sleep impossible. Soon after, everyone else stirred, questioning the intense heat. Stepping out of the tent, they discovered the forest ablaze. Engulfed in flames, could it be a dragon? Suddenly a giant dragon let out a piercing scream. His companions, gazing at it, knew it was truly a dragon. The guild's assignment proved true. They noticed the dragon itself was engulfed in flames, an ominous sign that screamed for them to run. Just then Lion asked about the gems. His companions grabbed him, urging him to run faster. The dragon immediately spewed flames, precisely where Lion had stood moments before, and they narrowly escaped. Lion's legs smoked from the dragon's scorching attack. Trapped, they found themselves surrounded by a circle of flames. Magica declared there was nowhere left to run. It seemed their only chance of survival was to defeat this dragon. Aruto recalled that the dragons he had fought in a previous life were intelligent enough to speak like humans, but this dragon remained silent and appeared smaller, leading Aruto to deduce he faced an even mightier foe. Aruto steeled himself. He couldn't let fear overwhelm him, or he wouldn't save Hana. Without hesitation, Aruto attacked the dragon with a water cut, reasoning that water was a fire dragon's inherent weakness. Immediately, the dragon conjured a shield, an unexpected move that stunned Aruto. He realized Magica wouldn't be able to break through it. Magica sprang into action, declaring her intent to help. Lion joined her, and together they assaulted the dragon. After striking the dragon, Magica realized its formidable physical strength, concluding that their current attacks wouldn't significantly impact its life. Aruto recalled his past life, deducing that the dragon must possess a weak spot. He shouted for Magica to distract the creature, planning to deliver a decisive blow himself. Magica attempted to draw the dragon's attention, but her efforts proved futile. Fleeing the dragon's flames, Lion exclaimed his bewilderment, wondering why he was being relentlessly pursued. Aruto realized that, while it wasn't the ideal moment to shift strategies, Lion's provocative skills might be key. Addressing Lion, Aruto announced he had a great plan. Lion urged his master not to delay and to reveal it. Aruto then shockingly ordered Lion to get hit by the dragon, practically begging him. Lion, utterly perplexed, couldn't comprehend what Aruto was asking. Even with his immortality, Lion refused to simply endure an attack. Aruto assured his friend that everything would be fine, promising to use his magic to weaken the dragon, and asking for Lion's trust. Lion, having no other choice, reluctantly trusted Aruto. He's a very cruel mentor, Lion muttered, as he braced himself directly against the dragon. Aruto launched a hacking attack, and together they resisted. The dragon Aruto then commanded Magica to attack. Magica, observing the dragon, realized its abdominal scales were a weak point. She struck him directly, and the dragon howled in pain. Realizing her attack had worked, she knew she had to act decisively. She unleashed a freezing star. As Magica prepared to strike again, the dragon slammed her with its tail, sending her crashing to the ground motionless. At that moment, Aruto and Lion feared greatly for Magica. Just as Magica was knocked to the ground by the dragon, the pendant around her neck suddenly activated, its properties designed to prevent instant death. As she plummeted towards the earth, she felt the pendant pulling and guiding her. This equipment prevented an instant demise, ensuring she didn't perish upon impact. Trying to get up, Magica realized the dragon was trying to step on her. The others immediately shouted her name and rushed to her aid. Moments later, the dragon stomped where Magica had been, only to find no one beneath its foot. It looked around confused, unable to comprehend where she had vanished. Aruto had managed to save Magica. Lion helped him support her, and admitted he hadn't realized the grave spell could be used in such a way. Aruto explained that in moments like this, it was perfect for urgent evasion. Lion held Magica, asking if she was alright. She confirmed she was. He then turned to Aruto, inquiring about the anti-epileptic. Aruto replied it was in the tent, but the dragon had burned it. Just then, the slime next to Aruto presented him with something. Aruto was stunned, struggling to believe that the slime had retrieved the anti-epileptic. Lion clapped Aruto on the shoulder, calling him a good fellow. They immediately administered the anti-epileptic to Magica. She quickly revived, apologizing for her carelessness. She admitted that, without the pendant Naruto had given her, she certainly wouldn't have survived. Now, however, she was ready to show the dragon what she was truly capable of. The others urged her not to rush in, insisting that Naruto and Lion would handle the dragon, and Majika should hide with them. Majika confronted Naruto, declaring she could still fight. She argued that Lion alone would be too great a burden for Naruto, and who would finish the dragon then? Lion simply stared at Majika. Naruto, however, stated that he understood her point. It was then decided that a strategic meeting was necessary. While they strategized, the dragon continued to prowl, searching for them. Moments later, Lion stepped out to face the dragon, asking what it was looking for, boldly calling it a blockhead, and proclaiming his presence. The dragon immediately charged. Lion realized he needed to distract the beast for just 1 minute while Naruto prepared a trap. He struck a nearby tree, stating aloud that he wasn't as fast as Majika, and couldn't toy with the dragon for long. However, he excelled in strength and endurance. The dragon burned the felled tree. Lion hurled directly in its path, and continued its charge towards him. Lion then turned to Naruto, asking if he needed much longer. Naruto replied that preparation was almost complete, and requested just a little more time. Lion, buying Naruto more time, hurled a stone at the dragon. The beast dodged, unwittingly falling straight into Naruto's trap. Realizing their success, Lion unleashed a powerful strike against the now ensnared dragon. Just then, Majika's voice cut through the air, shouting at Lion, "Is it faster, or is it rushing towards me with all its might?" Naruto urged everyone, warning that the spell would only hold the dragon for 10 seconds. Beyond that, they wouldn't stand a chance. Lion, preparing to launch Majika, asked if Shorty was ready, to which she incredulously replied, "Are you seriously asking me that?" With a mighty heave, Lion launched Majika high into the air, shouting for her to push forward. Majika, employing Twinkling Star and Fist of Dreams, assaulted the dragon, but it merely retaliated with a burst of flame. As she descended, Majika apologized, explaining that the dragon's reaction was completely wrong. The beast, not particularly intelligent, had fallen for their trap. Using her spells as bait, they had successfully lured it into looking upwards. Now a critical weak spot was exposed, and it was up to Lion to deliver the final blow, a task his companions believed him capable of. Wielding the Sword of Courage, Lion charged, cleaving the dragon's head clean off. In that triumphant moment, the beast fell and the entire group erupted in cheers, celebrating their perfectly coordinated victory. Turning to Naruto, Lion eagerly asked if he could now truly call himself a dragon slayer. Naruto affirmed, praising his excellent strike. Lion, brimming with joy, declared, "I finally got it." "It sounds damn brave." Majika, however, couldn't believe that Naruto had entrusted Lion with the finishing strike. Lion was utterly taken aback by her comment, wondering if she truly intended to pick a quarrel. The next moment, Majika frankly admitted that she believed Lion had truly exerted himself this time, and she would count on him if anything else was needed. Lion, glancing at Majika, couldn't tell if she was praising him or simply insane. Naruto only silently regarded his companions, but at that moment they all felt a sudden dizziness, unable to comprehend its cause. Clutching her head, Majika wondered aloud, "Was that truly dizziness from raising our level?" Naruto then realized his system indicated a rise of 8 levels, bringing him to level 78. It was a significant leap, as he'd barely gained a single level recently, even after slaying numerous demons. Naruto embraced his friends, who questioned the sudden gesture. He warned that if they were to pass out now, they'd risk waking up inside a monster's stomach. By morning, summoning a stone wall for protection, they collapsed, and Naruto entrusted Aryu with their safety. Aryu, ever loyal, readily obeyed his master. Tonight the moon cast a peculiarly beautiful light. The companions passed out, and the next morning, waking up, they were disoriented by what lay before them. A scorching heat enveloped them, and a blinding red light pulsed before their eyes. Opening his eyes, Naruto saw a colossal magic stone. A dragon's magic stone. Turning to Aryu, Naruto asked if he had truly dragged it all the way here. A weary Aryu confirmed it, praising Aryu. Naruto remarked that he'd even managed to collect a magic stone. While remaining vigilant, he embraced Aryu, expressing his pride, which made the spirit very happy. Magica, looking at Aruto, commented that she had never seen such a vibrant magic stone. Lion, his gaze fixed on it, echoed the question, "Is that truly a dragon stone?" As they all gazed at it, they were struck by its sheer beauty. Perhaps if they merely presented it, people would believe they had defeated a dragon. Glancing at the massive corpse behind them, Aruto realized this stone was just one of many pieces of evidence. The next moment, drawing his blade, Aruto began to cut into the dragon's leg. Lion, bewildered, asked what Aruto was doing. Aruto replied that they weren't simply abandoning the entire dragon. Here, take its scales. For instance, sewn into clothing, they could create armor capable of deflecting iron swords. Its claws could be forged into razor-thin blades, sharp enough to cleave through steel. Even a mantle crafted from its hide was rumored to offer protection against magical attacks. Pointing to a glistening object, Aruto identified a rare and valuable component, the dragon's eyeball. It commands an incredibly high price. The others stared in shock as Aruto held up a huge eyeball. Then, his eyes gleaming, Aruto declared he had found the rarest material, the dragon's heart. At that moment, Lion fainted. Magica, lifting Aruto by the collar, tried to revive Lion, surprised that he had collapsed. Magica, looking at Aruto, asked what the dragon's heart was for. Aruto explained that, if left for approximately 3 years, it transforms into a resurrecting medicine. Magica recalled hearing of similar medicine, but hadn't known it was made from dragon hearts. Lion then clarified that unfortunately, only humans could be brought back to life. Having meticulously dismantled the dragon, Aruto calculated that the haul was certainly enough to cover the cost of their uniforms. Realized he wouldn't have to worry about money for a while. Turning to Magica, Aruto cautioned her not to overspend. Magica assented. Aruto then pondered how to transport the remaining valuable materials, unwilling to leave them behind. At this moment, Lion, now awake, mentioned how useful an inventory skill would be. Aruto was astonished by the mention of an inventory. Lion struggled to explain, suggesting it was as if Aruto was storing items in invisible cells. Turning to Aruto, Lion asked for clarification, exclaiming, "What is this? It can't be. The ability to store an infinite number of things is beyond human capabilities." Aruto mused that with his bag destroyed, they would have to take only what they could carry and return for the rest. Then the slime turned towards him, and Aruto asked what was wrong. The slime then presented him with his bag, and Aruto suddenly understood how Ru had pulled it from his body. Aruto then wondered if Ru could move the dragon stone in the same way. Thinking it impossible, Aruto turned to Ru and asked if he could take in such a large amount of material. Ru merely opened his mouth and absorbed all the objects lying before him, leaving Aruto and his companions stunned. Lion, clutching the slime, declared inventory doesn't exist. At this, Aruto wept, lamenting that all his careful selection of materials had been for naught, while Aruto and his companion sat. Aruto, being comforted, an unseen observer watched them. This girl mused that only 3 individuals, particularly that boy, had managed to kill an entire dragon. It seemed God had been right after all. She eagerly anticipated what surprises the future held. Upon arriving at the guild, Aruto announced that everyone should listen carefully, as they had completed the dragon slaying request. Lion then invited the guild members to inspect the materials. The evaluator remarked that, while the materials seemed decent, there were many ways to acquire them, such as through auctions. The guild staff, however, stated that they could neither purchase the materials nor pay the reward, asking the group to take them back. Lion immediately countered that these were not goods intended for resale. Aruto, observing from the back, realized these proofs would be insufficient. He mused on the immutable nature of destiny, how each individual's path was ordained, and the immense difficulty of diverging from it. Such cognitive blind spots, he considered, were common consequences for those who defied their inherent fate, much like the very magic prevalent in this world. Addressing Lion, Aruto apologized, stating they had no choice but to concede. Lion, bewildered, couldn't fathom why, especially since they genuinely had defeated the dragon. Yet the guild members remained unconvinced. Aruto then explained their true objective: to earn enough for uniforms, they would pursue an alternative method to sell their materials. Lion acknowledged this as a valid course of action, yet he couldn't bring himself to agree with the surrender. Suddenly a voice cut through the air, chastising them for their excessive noise. Naruto looked up, a wave of surprise washing over him. As he saw the speaker, the girl interjected, "Even if corals are the main decoration of the guild, this is a bit much. Did you guys know about that?" They then inquired about the identity of the girl. Before them, she introduced herself as Citri Justice, the future head of the Duchy of Justice. Lion stated he didn't understand the stranger's words, but firmly requested she not meddle in their discussion. The girl retorted that he had inquired about her name. She had merely answered, then she posed, "What sort of barbarian adventurers are you?" Lion visibly struggled to maintain his composure, then demanded clarification on the girl's last remark. Aruto, intervening, urged him to calm down. Aruto studied the girl, repeating her name to himself. He recognized her as an official from the judicial body of the country, of the Council of True and False, one of Euphonia's 12 generals. What was she doing here? Aruto pondered, examining the items laid before the appraisers. The girl picked one up, identifying it as fresh spinal fluid. This proves the material was harvested only a few days after the dragon's death, confirming it hadn't been resold. They even bothered to ask the guys to buy these materials, he stated, and if Citri insists, they agreed. Next, the girl approached Aruto, leaning in to express her disbelief that he became a dragon slayer at such a young age. "I can't wait to find out what else you've saved for the future," she added, as Aruto, sweating, simply looked at her as they left the guild. A delighted Lion clutched 150 gold coins, exclaiming he had never seen so much money. Magica, however, quickly reminded him they couldn't spend it freely. Bruto walked behind them, pondering why Citri had spoken to him instead of Magica or Lion. Had she truly uncovered his plan? He had spent over 10 years meticulously planning Hannah's rescue. His current lodging was already integral to his operations. If he had known this would happen, should he have altered the plan? He then resolved not to change anything, realizing that to do so would be a bluff. There was nothing left but to proceed as intended, confident that everything was fine. So far, everything had been fine, and Aruto reassured himself. Meanwhile, Citri was sparring in the courtyard, quickly defeating her opponent. A footman approached, asking her to stop, noting that Citri had won and seemed more active than usual. Did something happen in the city? He inquired. She replied that she believed she had found her little man, and affirmed that God's words truly held sway. It was worth sending a request for the extermination of dragons. The state strives to kill dragons at any cost, though it's an impossible feat for any single person. It is highly unlikely. But if someone deviates from God's ordained fate, if someone appears and kills a dragon, it is this little man who will lead the world to disaster. A new source of danger, she wasn't absolutely sure, but she couldn't disregard him. When her eyes met that boy's flash of fighting spirit, she mused, recalling Aruto. Citri believed that had he not walked a righteous path, he would never have revealed such a spirit. But moments later, she effortlessly deflected her opponent's attack and urged Lord Fortimus to watch closely. She intended to reveal Aruto's true nature. Under the shining sun, Naruto, Magica, and Lion arrived at school for the newly announced class placements. Lion eagerly searched for his name and found it. Lion, too, was enrolled in Class C. Adjacent to the names were the exam scores, prompting Lion to wonder why placements were no longer strictly based on merit. If this was true, why was I still in the second lowest class? Magica suggested Aruto's written exam scores were perhaps catastrophically low. Aruto then asked what class Magica had been placed in. Magica proudly announced she was in Class A and a scholarship student. Lion couldn't believe his ears, while Aruto congratulated her with genuine warmth. Magica then asked, "Weren't you also placed in Class A?" Aruto reported his placement in Class D, utterly surprising both his companions. Lion, collapsing onto the floor, wailed that Aruto had prepared for so long, yet ended up in a class below him. He jokingly accused Aruto of perhaps writing off answers in the wrong places. At that, Magica snapped that Lion was an idiot, rebuking him for his rudeness and striking him. Aruto explained that as someone from a peasant family, with a humble standard of living, anything higher than Class D was out of reach for him, regardless of his scores. Besides, Aruto revealed that school life held little importance for him. He didn't care about his placement. Everything was fine at Aruto's words. His companions remained utterly surprised. The next moment, they arrived at school and were already saying goodbye, heading to their respective classes. Aruto hoped that both would fit into the school, and approached his own class, where he believed his troubles would begin. If he remembered correctly, Water would come splashing down on him. The moment he opened these doors, the student who had been practicing claimed he was practicing water magic, then apologized for the mishap, insisting it wasn't on purpose, and asked for Aruto's forgiveness, dismissing him as the garbage of poor peasants. Aruto remembered the mockery from the upper classes, directed at the lower ones, and instantly understood the situation. Wishing him success with his practice, Aruto noted that the scenario was unfolding exactly as before. The other students, observing Aruto, were perplexed as to why he wasn't wet. The other student, regaining control of his magic, commented that his friend wasn't very good at controlling it. It was his turn, so he attacked Aruto. However, Aruto countered their magic with his own, effortlessly remaining dry. The young man who attacked Aruto couldn't comprehend how he had repelled his spell so easily. Aruto, sitting and opening his bag, mused that in his past life, such a feat would be considered great sorcery. His attackers didn't understand what he meant, concluding that Aruto must have powerful magic armor, stolen no doubt from somewhere. They were convinced they needed to reclaim, name it, employing fire magic. The young man declared that was a slightly dangerous spell, but if Aruto was wearing armor, then it was nothing terrible. Looking at his opponents, Aruto realized they were treating him like a thief. He pondered, was I really so reckless as to use offensive magic in front of everyone? Still, their abilities can't be that strong. At that moment, another student entered the class and unleashed a fireball. At that moment, Aruto leaped up and managed to prevent an attack that could have hit the girl. He moved with such blinding speed that he startled the attacker, then declared even if it was just practice, it was dangerous to use attacking spells in class. What if someone gets hurt? Next time, he warned his opponent, be more attentive. The bewildered attacker couldn't comprehend who had just intervened. At this moment, a girl entering the classroom asked what was going on at all. Aruto, afraid to turn around, realized this was the meeting he had long awaited. Turning, he saw Hana standing directly before him. Approaching Hana, Aruto casually explained that someone was merely practicing magic, assuring her everything was fine and not to worry. Aruto's eyes welled up with tears as he considered the immense pain he was destined to endure. He couldn't possibly become involved with Hana again. Only 5 years remained of his own life. Should they rekindle their past love, he knew he would have to abandon her once more, letting them remain strangers, rather than force her through such agony. Hana's death was a mere 4 months away. Aruto left the classroom, reassuring himself that everything was fine. Mentally, he vowed to Hana, I will definitely protect you. When Hana saw Aruto, she couldn't believe her eyes. Her presence at this school was, for Hana Colonel, nothing short of a miracle. The Colonels were a venerable and senior, noble family in the kingdom of Euphemia. As the family's heiress, great hopes were pinned on her. Her parents provided her with one of the world's finest mentors. Yet, she seemed incapable of anything. The mentor, speaking to her parents, declared he had never encountered a person so utterly devoid of talent. Hana silently observed the conversation. From behind the doors, the mentor then elaborated, explaining that talent or giftedness was an integral part of human development. Her innate talent registered at an undeniable level, but at such a low level, nothing significant could ever be built, let alone an excellent foundation. The mentor, though hesitant to upset them, stated plainly their daughter possessed no talent. 10 years had passed since then. Just as the mentor predicted, Hana consistently failed. No matter what she attempted, she couldn't advance even a single level. Everyone abandoned her, even her own father. Despite her struggles, Hana fought on, managing to enroll in the school, thanks to political maneuvering. The school, in turn, couldn't afford for her incompetence to become public and tarnish the esteemed Colonel name. Hana believed she needed to be as inconspicuous as possible, to barely breathe lest she be noticed, ensuring no one would mock her, allowing her to simply remain alone. Yet upon entering the classroom, she felt an undeniable shift in her life. She remembered a conversation with her mother, who had once spoken of her intended. Her mother admitted she didn't know who he was, but assured her that when they met, she would instinctively recognize him, as it was destiny. Upon seeing Aruto, the girl immediately recognized him as her destined betrothed. Aruto was training with a sword when the teacher instructed the students to wield their weapons, as if genuinely battling demons. He declared, "You can't swing at corners. That's the whole point of practicing martial arts. I'll exclude anyone who treats this lightly." Though his tone was firm, he wasn't entirely serious. While Aruto brandished a dagger, the teacher abruptly attacked him. Aruto dodged, asking why the teacher had attacked so suddenly. The teacher demanded Aruto's weapon, stating it was too soon for him to wield it in such a manner. Aruto possessed a dragon fang dagger, a rare and precious weapon crafted from dragon teeth. The teacher inquired about its origin. Aruto thought to himself that he had forged it after slaying a dragon, but knew such a claim would be dismissed as nonsense. The teacher then asserted that Aruto would never improve if he relied solely on his weapon. The teacher declared he would keep the dagger until Aruto's skill level increased, and commanded hand it over quickly. The other students remarked that if Levant, their teacher, was a high-class adventurer, Aruto stood no chance. Aruto stood silently, anticipating what would happen next. As the teacher attacked again, he commented on Aruto's slow reaction time, finding it unacceptable that Aruto hadn't already surrendered the dagger. Aruto continued dodging, determined not to be defeated. Aruto realized the teacher was indeed a high-class practitioner. The teacher, observing Aruto's evasions, questioned if Aruto, a mere peasant, was truly capable of dodging his attacks. Perhaps Aruto was simply lucky. He then declared, "Very well, let's play tag." Upon hearing tag, Aruto pondered. The teacher then stated that if Aruto remained untouched by the end of the lesson, he could keep the dagger. Aruto, however, couldn't understand why the teacher coveted it so fiercely. Levant wouldn't simply let Aruto pass. Warming up, the teacher declared that refusal would be deemed a defeat, offering no concessions even to a peasant like Aruto. Their game had to begin. Shouting, the teacher lunged at Aruto, who skillfully dodged his attacks. Despite his imposing size, Levant moved with surprising speed. Yet, Aruto found him less intimidating compared to Magica. Meanwhile, the teacher, internally, marveled at how Aruto managed to evade every strike, attributing it to pure luck. Suddenly, Levant unleashed air magic, an unexpected move for Aruto. The teacher, attacking Aruto, believed he had trapped him. However, his strike merely hit the wall, leaving him in disbelief, as Aruto had vanished from that spot. Aruto, now positioned directly behind Levant, realized how narrowly he had escaped. The teacher was clearly serious, employing offensive magic in bursts. The onlookers cheered for the teacher, urging him to maintain his aggressive pace. Hana, however, remained silent, her gaze fixed on Aruto, anticipating his next move. As he continued to evade Levant's assaults, Aruto wondered if the teacher was truly so resolute. Cornered, Aruto reluctantly employed his distance reduction technique. In an instant, he flickered from his spot to a nearby tree. He mused that he had only recently mastered this ability, which allowed him to traverse short distances with incredible speed. Levant grew increasingly frustrated, unable to comprehend why Aruto remained so elusive. At this rate, he would surely lose. Just then, Aruto settled onto a tree branch. The teacher challenged him, asking if he truly believed he had escaped, and then pointed to Aruto's torn hem. Was he so fast, Levant exclaimed, that he didn't even notice his clothes were ripped? Victory is mine. Aruto, seeing his torn clothes, realized he had been watching every movement carefully, and teacher Levant definitely hadn't touched him. He deduced this as the wind, the magic of the wind. Avant knew Aruto wouldn't make false accusations, yet one of the other students claimed to have seen the teacher touch Aruto. Another agreed. Hana, standing nearby, thought these guys were lying, as the human eye couldn't distinguish anything. At such speed, Aruto realized his situation was dire. This wasn't a matter of distance or typical evasion. Levant held out his hand, demanding Aruto's dragon's fang as promised. Someone then shouted for everyone to wait, asserting that the teacher hadn't touched Aruto. It was Magica, who declared she had been watching the game carefully. Naruto descended from the tree, asking what Magica was doing there. Magica replied she was merely passing by, then shifted to a more pressing matter. Is this man really a teacher? She asked, turning to Levant. Levant looked at the girl, recognizing a significant risk factor. Magica was a state-level threat. Fearing trouble if he argued with her, he conceded it should be so. Levant, acknowledging her unique vision, turned back to Aruto. He warned that even if it was just a game, if Aruto lost, problems could arise, especially now that she was here. Levant then suggested they start all over again. He then unleashed a wind cutter, declaring it proof of his A-level adventurer status. He explained it was an advanced technique that infused magic into their hands, turning them into weapons, and challenged Naruto to try and dodge it. The next moment, Levant attacked Naruto, believing he had him trapped. This magic not only increased range, but also launched wind blades around the opponent. Watching Naruto, Levant considered him a mere student. If he died, it could easily be interpreted as an accident. During training, he then willed his attack to cleave Naruto. Naruto concentrated, acknowledging the piercing sharpness of the wind blades. He resolved to avoid even a single blow from such a powerful magic. Naruto deftly dodged every blade. Levant, the teacher, was astonished, thinking it impossible for a weakling at the first level of life. Yet a nagging doubt persisted. Could someone truly defy the expectations for his rank? He rationalized it must have been an accident. Perhaps I'm just not feeling my best today. Levant tried to reassure himself. Still plagued by doubt, Levant drew his sword. As a teacher of the school, he couldn't tolerate losing to Naruto. He charged directly at him, blade in hand. Naruto couldn't believe Levant had drawn a real sword. Finding the situation increasingly desperate, the lesson was almost over. If he could just evade this final attack, victory would be his. Just then, some other students questioned how Naruto had managed to avoid the attacks, believing he must have a trick. They mockingly declared he should play honestly, like a man, and grabbed Naruto by the legs. They urged him to attack Levant while they held him. Completely blindsided, Naruto stood helpless. As Levant closed in, laughter erupted from the other students. But only Hana harbored a chilling thought. Is the teacher actually going to kill him? Levant scoffed internally, believing he could easily extinguish the life of a small fry at the first level. He refused to lose to someone like Naruto. Levant's attack bore down, a silent command for Naruto to die. With mere seconds remaining in the lesson, Naruto utilized a hacking skill. The teacher's sword instantly flew from his grasp, leaving him bewildered as to how it had moved on its own. Naruto then employed a distance reduction technique, instantly reappearing in a different spot, still accompanied by the students holding his legs. Following this, Naruto activated Grave and Argalization. The teacher was defeated. Naruto declared the teacher unfit, blinded by greed and self-love, and then dropped the ball right beside him. The final seconds ticked away, and the clock signaled the end of the lesson. Naruto had won. The student, still holding Naruto's legs, stared in disbelief at the teacher's defeat. Naruto announced the lesson was over, and requested they release him. The stunned students slowly took their hands off Naruto's feet. After the lesson, students buzzed with discussions about Teacher Levant, praising his coolness and lamenting that they could never replicate his movements. They wondered if they could ever aspire to be as impressive as him. Naruto walked behind the other students, realizing no one truly remembered him. He pondered the pervasive magic of this world. Just then Magica ran up and hit Naruto. Naruto didn't understand why. Magica called him inattentive, criticizing how easily he was confused. By a stab in the back as punishment, he would have to attend her training after school. Depressed, Naruto mentioned his plans to improve his blacksmithing skills today. He then claimed he hadn't lost his dagger, suggesting Magica ignore it, but she insisted otherwise. Hana stood silently behind them, observing later. As the sun set, she began her solo training. During her training, thoughts of Naruto consumed her. Why did no one praise him? The teacher was certainly skilled, but did it truly seem to her alone that Naruto surpassed him? People didn't notice, but Naruto sometimes even closed his eyes during attacks. She couldn't comprehend how he managed it. With only a single life level, Hana, a level 4 herself, felt she could never imitate Naruto. Believing she lacked talent, she shook her head, dismissing these negative thoughts. A natural gift couldn't simply be replaced by effort. In every aspect, Naruto probably trained incredibly hard. Clutching her sword, the girl resolved that she too could achieve something if she put in the effort. The next moment, she dropped her sword, grimacing at the pain. Her hands were covered in bruises. Tears welled in her eyes, but she resolved to become stronger, not for someone else, but for herself. Naruto entered the training hall. Running into Hana, he quickly apologized, explaining that he hadn't noticed any occupancy markers and assumed the hall was free. Hana asked him to wait, then suggested they have a brief chat. Naruto initially feigned deafness, but as she repeated her request, he merely gazed silently at the door. Sitting on the floor, Hana introduced herself as Hana Colonel, remarking on Naruto's exceptional skill. particularly how no ordinary student could evade teacher Levantai. She wondered how Aruto had become so strong. Aruto stood by the door struggling with his resolve, acutely aware of the 5 years remaining. If he gets closer to Hana now, he will only make her sad in the future, Aruto thought, deciding he would simply keep an eye on her. Without turning to Hana, Aruto stated that his strength was a result of extensive training. Unexpectedly, Hana grabbed his hand. Both were visibly embarrassed. Hana quickly withdrew her hand, turning away as she apologized for her audacious grab, regretting touching Aruto's hand so impulsively. Aruto gazed at Hana, a smile touching his lips. She was exactly as he remembered her from back then. Hana broke his reverie, asking him to hear her out. If it wasn't too much trouble, she wondered if Aruto would consider training with her. Despite her relentless efforts, she hadn't achieved any real success. Even with the guidance of excellent teachers, she made no progress and consistently fell behind. Turning to Aruto, she voiced a feeling that if he taught her, everything would finally work out, then apologized for her abrupt request. Naruto listened intently as she, worried that she might have caused discomfort. He noticed her hands covered in wounds, and a pang hit him. The opportunity to communicate with her was slipping away. He was uncertain of the best course of action, yet he found himself utterly incapable of refusing the earnest request of someone so diligent and so beloved from a past life. Aruto replied that if she truly desired it, he would lend her all his strength and assistance. Hana, beaming, extended her hand thanking Aruto. They shook hands. She declared that she would do everything in her power. Aruto smiled, saying, "This is necessary, fantastic. We'll all try our best." Suddenly, voices declared they had heard everything. A bewildered Hana looked up startled. Lion stood before her, declaring, "Friends of friends are friends too." Behind him a girl peered out. He announced this initiative was called Operation 100 Friends. Extending his hand to Hana, he offered a warm greeting. He introduced himself as Lion, and asked if he could just call her Hana. Hana, flustered, agreed that he could seeing Lion. Aruto grumbled, "Friends of friends. What are you even talking about? We're not even friends." Lion took great offense and Aruto had to calm him. Meanwhile, Magica introduced herself to Hana as Magica, Estate Terror, and said she could just call her Magica. They shook hands. Hana, noting the 3-part name, asked if Magica was of royal lineage. Magica explained that yes, she was from a former royal family. The squirrel family had lost its power. The royal bloodline no longer held its former strength. Lion and Aruto listened attentively to Magica. Lion abruptly interrupted, demanding to know why he hadn't been informed of her royal background. Magica stated matter-of-factly that it was obvious because she hadn't mentioned it. Lion exploded, proclaiming that if she was truly blessed with royal birth, then his own rare, heroic talents paled in comparison to hers. Looking at Magica, he continued, "I thought she was just quiet. How could such a small creature be of royal blood?" True to form, they immediately began to bicker, while Aruto and Hana observed from the sidelines. Hana turned to Aruto asking if they should intervene. Aruto reassured her, stating that Lion was unusually strong and would be fine. Once he couldn't defeat a single demon, but now he possessed the strength to contend with Magica. Aruto knew Hana would succeed. She would definitely become stronger. A few days later, not far from Euphonia, the group headed into the forest for training. Aruto introduced Hana and Slime. Together, they tackled obstacles and challenges as a team. Periodically, Aruto offered Hana assistance, inquiring if she was alright. She confirmed she was. Then Magica inquired about Hana's level. The girl revealed she was level 4, but lacked talent, preventing her from developing any skills beyond level 1. Hearing this, Magica and Lion stared, asking if Hana was joking. How could someone possess no innate talent? Lion exclaimed, tears welling. Hana apologized. Aruto then told Lion to mind his words. Lion, however, declared it great, much to everyone's astonishment. Lion clarified that, while a gift or talent aids in ability development, it doesn't dictate one's only path. Abilities aren't inherently tied to a specific lifestyle, and lacking such a gift doesn't mean one can't forge their own way. Isn't that wonderful? He asked. An idea struck Aruto. Lion was right. Hana had never heard such an interpretation of talent deficiency before. Aruto remarked that it was such a brilliant idea. I couldn't believe it came from Lion. Magica confessed she always thought Lion was an idiot. Everyone stared at Lion, who then asked why they held such a low opinion of him. They arrived at a lake deeming it a suitable spot. Hannah, curious about the training, suggested practicing on trees, since they were in the forest. Aruto explained that this training would be under real conditions. From now on, Hannah would face real monsters. The revelation shocked Hannah. She stared at Aruto, declaring she couldn't possibly do it. She couldn't just suddenly kill a monster. Pulling something from his bag, reassured her everything's fine. He said, I won't let anyone hurt you. Just then goblins materialized before them. Lion protested that Aruto was being too cruel to Hannah. Magica added that Aruto didn't need to lure quite so many goblins. Aruto announced he had an idea. He turned to his friends, motioning for them to lean in as he whispered his plan. His friends immediately understood. The plan is truly worthy of a master, Lion replied. Both Magica and Lion were inspired and ready for battle. Aruto then handed the sword to Hannah, announcing their readiness to begin. Hannah, however, admitted she wasn't ready yet. Aruto expressed his trust in his companions, and together they charged into the fray. Magica skillfully dodged goblins. He leaped quickly, realizing that dispatching them one by one would be a waste of time. Unleashing an area attack, knowing her power, was more than enough for such monsters. This was Magica's consistent strategy. Meanwhile, Aruto activated a bright stone, joining the assault against the goblins. Hannah watched in awe at her companion's strength. Just then a goblin lunged from the bushes, and she realized she was utterly unprepared. Aruto instantly shielded her, closing the distance in a flash, determined to keep Hannah safe. Dispatching the goblin, Aruto turned to Hannah. Asking if she was hurt, she replied that she was fine. Aruto then realized the moment had come. Just then Lion was overwhelmed by goblins, shouting that he'd let his guard down, and was surely doomed. Hannah saw Lion buried under a pile of goblins, and cried out for help. She turned to Aruto, exclaiming that Lion was in trouble. Aruto, waving off a goblin, apologized for being momentarily busy, then calmly told Hannah to save him. Hannah, hearing this, protested that she couldn't, but Aruto assured her everything would be fine. The monster's attention was solely on Lion, giving Hannah an opening to attack from behind, but she was riddled with self-doubt. Aruto, however, believed everything was proceeding according to plan. Aruto's strategy hinged on Lion's abilities, his exceptional distraction skills, remarkable physical prowess, and immortality. These traits allowed Lion to remain the goblin's primary target indefinitely. With Lion drawing the enemy's attention, Hannah should be able to handle the immediate threats. She and Magica could then cope with the remaining goblins. The critical question, however, was whether Hannah possessed the courage to defeat the monsters. Hannah clutched her sword with trembling hands, overwhelmed by fear. But if not her, and who resolved to recall her training, she attacked a goblin from behind, inflicting an injury. Tears welled in her eyes. Magica observed the wound was too minor to be fatal, but suspected Hannah's psychological damage was far greater. Aruto watched Hannah, who was visibly terrified. Her friend had been attacked right before her eyes, and she blamed herself for her fear. In a similar situation, agonizing over her weakness. Just then Aruto called out to her, assuring her she could do it. His voice filled with confidence. Hannah gripped her sword tightly, resolve hardening within her. She wanted to become stronger. If Aruto was next to her, she felt she could find the courage to be strong. Hannah charged towards the goblins, swinging her sword with newfound strength, her inner monologue declaring an end to her self-pity. Determined to become strong, she pushed relentlessly forward. A goblin fired an arrow towards Hannah's back, but Magica intercepted it. Magica rebuked the goblin for interfering, returning the arrow with equal force. Hannah attacked the goblins again, and after cleaving one in two, a surge of confidence washed over her. Realizing her growing capability, suddenly Hannah reeled, almost losing consciousness. Aruto caught her, his voice laced with concern. As he asked if she was alright, she apologized to Aruto, explaining she merely felt dizzy. Aruto informed her that it was due to a level increase. Hannah was overjoyed, her mind racing with the confirmation of her level up. Then Hannah burst into tears, crying on Aruto's shoulder. She had been waiting for this moment for all her 15 years. Their moment was interrupted by Lion, who grumbled about how long he had to lie there, with goblins still piled on top of him. Aruto admitted he had completely forgotten about Lion. Hana, meanwhile, questioned how Lion could remain so calm. Lion, bleeding and still pinned by goblins, declared himself quite brave, asserting such monsters couldn't harm him. Aruto then revealed it had been a plan to foster Hana's bravery. Upon hearing this, Hana understood everything. Hana released Aruto from her embrace, who then suggested they take a break until she calmed down. Hana replied that she was fine and ready to continue. Aruto smiled at her, agreeing. First, he called his slime Ru and asked it to retrieve his sword. Aruto then offered Hana this very sword. It was a sword crafted from dragon bone. Aruto explained that the sword was made of dragon bone, and he had crafted it specifically for Hana, utilizing her blacksmithing skills. Taking the sword in her hands, Hana thought it was truly beautiful. Behind her, goblins were already poised to attack Hana. Drawing the sword, she attacked them. After dispatching the goblins, she marveled at the weapon's properties, wondering how such a powerful attack could be unleashed. With a mere flick of her wrist, she exclaimed that she couldn't possibly wield such an amazing sword. Aruto pointed to the sword, stating his belief that a tool in a person's hand can teach them. This sword was meant to make her stronger. Aruto explained certain she could now become stronger. He urged Hana to believe in herself. Hana gripped the hilt tighter, agreeing with Aruto's words. Magica and Lion merely smiled. Watching Hana, Aruto announced they would continue to help her raise her levels. For some time, they would gradually increase the number of opponents, carefully monitoring Hana's progress. Moments later, Hana was once again engaged with goblins. Soon they believed they had defeated all of them. Aruto ran up to Hana, commending her good work and asking if she was hurt. Aruto wondered what level Hana had achieved. Checking her status, Hana asked Aruto to look. Aruto then saw that Hana's unique talent had manifested. Her level was 31, and the talent was called the Germ of a Hero. Aruto approached Hana and upon seeing her talent, the Germ of a Hero, asked Lion if he had ever encountered such a thing. Lion in turn addressed Aruto, asking if Aruto himself had ever heard of or seen such a talent. Magica, standing behind them, overheard the mention of Hero's germs, and immediately realized Hana was the one she had been searching for. The world of fortune was governed by 6 gods: Largo, god of war; diatonic, goddess of life and birth; Samadias, god of craft; Nicias, who controlled soul and fate; Fortamis, god of justice and order, and the chief deity of the squirrel tribe; and Amano Iloha, lord of nature. Magica, princess of the squirrel tribe, had been born from Amano Aloha's divination. The prophecy declared, together with the hero, she will transform this world. Magica's mission was to find the owner of this heroic gift and become their right hand. 7 years after meeting and working with Aruto, she had finally found a hero. Hana's talent remained undeveloped, likely due to the machinations of the god Fortamis. The cult of Fortamis, with the world's largest following, wielded tremendous power. The kingdom of Euphonia, where they currently stood, fell under his dominion. Under the guise of justice and order, Fortamis relentlessly eliminated anyone who displeased him. Hana's world-changing talent had been suppressed all this time, likely because it posed a direct threat to Fortamis. Observing Hana, Magica realized Aruto had broken the seal. Following Aruto had been the right decision. Now they only needed to see if they could nurture Hana's talent. Just then Aruto called out to Magica, asking if she had any ideas. Noticing the girl seemed deep in thought, Magica replied that there was nothing amiss. She mused that revealing the truth about Hana's heroic gift now would only burden her. It was still too early. At that moment Hana turned, apologizing and suggesting they return home, since morning had arrived. She was also worried that her butler would be anxious. Hearing this, Aruto agreed. Hana had already raised her level more than enough. Hana then turned to Aruto, saying she had another request. Aruto wondered what she would ask. Then, embarrassed, Hana asked if they could go to her house together. Aruto replied that she would need an explanation for returning so late. Aruto recalled visiting Hana's house after training. In his previous life back then, he had injured her, enraging the butler. He realized they truly needed to go together. Turning to Magica and Lion, Aruto asked them to first visit the guild and sell the large stones. Upon arriving at the house, Hana and Aruto beheld it. Aruto found it so beautiful, he felt he could never tire of looking at it. Hana asked Aruto if he was surprised. explaining that the first head of the Colonel family had been one of the founders of the Euphonia Kingdom. The doors opened for them, and they entered the mansion. As they moved through the portrait-lined corridor, Hannah spoke about her family. All subsequent family members had been outstanding, playing many important roles in the country's history. Aruto then asked if she would follow in their footsteps, and she affirmed her lack of talent was thus a monumental problem. Aruto simply remained silent. The next moment they entered a room, and Hannah asked Aruto if he could wait. "I won't be long," she added, to which Aruto agreed, sitting on the sofa. As Hannah went further into the room, Aruto stated that the butler could emerge, appearing before Aruto seemingly out of nowhere. The butler, surprised to have been noticed, introduced himself as Klein, head butler of the Colonel house, then made some inquiries about Aruto, asking if his assumption that the young man's name was Aruto was correct. Aruto noted that, since the butler was here and had been hiding, he likely wished to speak privately. The butler praised Aruto's perceptiveness and asked to get straight to the point. What was Aruto's purpose in coming to Hannah? Given there were around 30 other students, Line wished Aruto to explain why he had chosen Lady Hannah. Aruto knew it was no secret that Colonel represented the highest nobility. If he claimed it was mere coincidence, the butler, considering Aruto a peasant, would never believe him. So Aruto explained that he and Lady Hannah, despite her lack of talent, seemed to understand each other. "We've both experienced a similar standard of living, knowing what it's like to be a beggar," Aruto elaborated. Klein, looking directly at Aruto, simply responded that Aruto and Hannah shared similar circumstances, acknowledging that it must be difficult for Aruto. In fact, Klein observed, Lady Hannah has begun to smile much more often lately, and it seems that is thanks to Aruto. The butler then thanked Aruto as he poured tea, and proceeded to ask one final question. Klein inquired what kind of relationship Aruto envisioned with Miss Hannah in the future. Aruto, after placing a cup before him, hearing the question, recalled his past, and responded that he hoped they could become best friends. The butler remained silent. Then, turning to Aruto and sweeping a mug off the table, he declared, "This cannot be. You are merely a peasant." In the next instant, the butler held a knife to Aruto's throat, with the blade pressed against Aruto's neck. The butler stated that Aruto's desire to befriend a nobleman was outrageous. "Never again," the butler demanded. "Are you to get involved with Lady Hannah?" Aruto observed the butler, noting the abrupt and unnatural shift in his demeanor after their initial friendly interaction. This sudden hostility mirrored a past event, when Aruto had inadvertently caused Hannah harm, and Klein's rage had erupted. It was as if an unseen force manipulated his emotions, fueling his anger towards Hannah, and attempting to trap Aruto in the same tragic fate he experienced in his previous life, a consequence of Fortimus's pervasive magic. In this world, if Aruto remained silent now, history would undoubtedly repeat itself. He had to alter his destiny. Leaping back from his chair, Aruto confronted the butler, demanding to know why he couldn't contact Hannah. The butler scoffed. Can Aruto not grasp that a lady is deemed unworthy if she associates with commoners, especially those of significantly lower standing, and even more so if that individual presumes to be her intellectual equal? Aruto, however, believed the butler was the one lacking dignity. He knew Hannah had grown significantly stronger during their training, potentially even excelling among the D class. Had Klein truly done for her over the past 15 years? The butler vehemently denied this possibility. Aruto countered, asserting the truth of his words. Hannah had remained at level 1 all this time, and Klein had merely watched over her, without attempting to facilitate any actual growth. Isn't that a lack of dignity? Aruto declared, wrenching the knife from the butler's grasp. He then revealed his awareness of 5 additional butlers, concealed within the room by stealth skills, producing a handful of knives. Aruto displayed the weapons he'd taken from the hidden butlers. The first butler appeared to be the strongest among them. Aruto stated, but if I could disarm them all so easily, their true skill level is clearly far from impressive. And what he would do if the situation escalated out of control. Aruto then challenged Klein, asking if his noble dignity would truly prevent him. Witnessing this, the butler questioned the entire purpose of Aruto's actions. Just then the door opened. Hannah entered, apologizing for the wait, and offering to show Aruto the palace. Spotting Klein, she asked why he was present. Aruto smiled, remarking that the butler was treating him like a friend. The butler replied that he and Lady Hannah were acquainted, making his presence entirely natural. Aruto then expressed his hope that they would meet again soon. Bowing to Aruto, the butler echoed his sentiment, hoping for their next encounter. They exited the room and continued through the palace. As Aruto walked behind Hannah, he considered that his actions, though potentially punishable as assault, were the only way to instill the necessary fear. He reflected on his past life. They were killed by Semijon, who had appeared without warning and was unstoppable. If Aruto and Hannah had been prepared and fortified their defenses, everything could have been different. They were the only ones who might have survived that tragedy. Aruto realized Hannah turned to Aruto, attempting to get his attention. Deep in thought, Aruto simply uttered a apologize. As Hannah opened the room's door, she commented on how unusual it was to see him so. Distracted, they stepped into Hannah's brightly lit room. Noticing the neatly arranged items everywhere, Aruto realized this was his first time in her personal space. In his previous life, he'd never ventured beyond the living room. He wondered, was this truly Hannah's bedroom back then? Hannah confirmed it was indeed her bedroom, much to Aruto's surprise. She then explained that it was customary among the nobility to invite close friends into their private chambers, and she wished to thank him properly. Hannah turned to Aruto, expressing her deep gratitude. Aruto, however, stated that her newfound strength was her own merit. He had only helped Hannah, blushing, admitted she had anticipated that exact response from him. Hannah began, "If Aruto doesn't mind, could we?" Aruto didn't let her finish, his mind racing with a grim realization. In his previous life, Hannah had also confessed her feelings and offered to be with him, but he couldn't allow that now. Accepting her confession would mean swearing his life to her, leading them to dream of a happy future, and inevitably repeating the past tragedy. He knew he had to refuse her for Hannah's sake. Hannah, blushing, then asked if he would be her best friend. Aruto was completely taken aback, utterly unprepared for such a question. The embarrassed Hannah stood before him, awaiting his answer. Aruto, blushing, mentally chastised himself. How could I have thought she was going to confess her love? What was I even thinking? He felt a prick of embarrassment seeing him. Hannah asked how he was, then suggested he sit down and offered her hand. Aruto replied he would certainly be happy to be her friend. Smiling, Hannah thanked Aruto and expressed her delight. She mused that while she couldn't yet say if he would be her boyfriend, there was no need to rush. Now she could spend ample time with Aruto. A moment later, Hannah bid Aruto farewell, thanking him for the day. Aruto apologized for staying so long, then noticed a sword standing beside a glass display. Aruto approached the sword, about to speak when Hannah noticed his intense focus. This sword is crafted from a very rare ore, called orichalcon, Hannah explained, adding that it was forged for the first head of her family in the aftermath of the War of the Gods. Seeing the blade, Aruto finally understood what orichalcon was. Experiencing its presence for the first time, Hannah revealed it was a carnal family heirloom, yet no one had ever been able to wield it. Aruto wondered why, as the sword didn't appear heavy enough to warrant such a restriction. Regarding these restrictions, Hannah explained that a powerful force was invested in the sword, intended to fight for all that was important in the world. However, it became unusable after the first head of the family participated in the kingdom's foundation. Hearing this, Aruto simply gazed at the sword, musing that perhaps it was because one couldn't fight for the interests of other countries while protecting one's own. Still, Hannah turned to Aruto and asked if he was certain he didn't want to have dinner with her. Aruto, though pleased, had to decline. It wouldn't be right for a peasant like me to stay here all night, he explained. Hannah affirmed his reasoning. Aruto, addressing Hannah, apologized for leaving, but offered to see her tomorrow at school. He then declared to Hannah that they were best friends from that day on and forever. As Aruto departed, a somber thought crossed his mind. The tomorrow they hoped for might never arrive. He wished Hannah would remember his presence in this world. Regardless of what transpired, Hannah watched him leave. Aruto knew Hannah's death was only 7 hours away. Aruto returned home to be greeted by the slime. Entering the house, Aruto announced his return, then asked if the goblins had sold magic stones. The slime promptly regurgitated a pile of coins. Aruto observed the large quantity. You'll need to ask the others to give coins to Hannah, Aruto instructed. Hearing this, the slime looked surprised, as if asking a question. Aruto asked Ru to stay in Lion or Magiki's room today. as he had some personal matters to attend to, and requested Ru to send his greetings. Ryu reached out to Aruto, who wasn't sure if the slime was protesting. As Ryu climbed onto him, Aruto realized he hadn't spent much alone time with Ryu. Recently smiling, Aruto embraced Ryu, holding him close. Later, after Ryu fell asleep and night had fully descended, Aruto simply gazed out the window. Aruto knew Sumijin would soon appear on this road, heading towards the Colonel family home. Aruto intended to intercept him here, which was why he chose this particular room. He then summoned his skill table, questioning if he could truly defeat Sumijin. With his current stats, should he find himself unable to resist once more? In his previous life, Aruto had never imagined such weakness. Now was not the time for doubts. He had risked everything for this day. All that remained was to fight. With every ounce of his strength, Naruto was determined to defeat Sumijin, whatever the cost, to avenge everything he had endured in his past life. That day a pall hung over the capital. It was unclear whether the cause was fire or a demon attack from a rooftop. Aruto surveyed the scene, noticing a mansion ablaze near the royal castle. The Colonel house, everyone inside had been killed. Rushing towards the burning structure, Aruto desperately tried to comprehend what had transpired. His only concern was Hana safe. Approaching the house, Aruto spotted a stranger. The butler stood before this man, shielding Hana and her mother. The stranger declared that this was why. They understood everything now. Holding a sphere of energy in his hand, the man stated at this very moment, Hana Colonel would be dead by the will of the ruler. The butler then questioned how is this possible, and Sumijin Salwi himself, one of Euphonia's 12 generals, would carry out such an act. The man retorted, the 12 generals of Euphonia are the government. Furthermore, they are a detachment, working for the good of the country. This was an order, and everything Sumijin did was completely legal. Doesn't the butler believe that? A mere butler shouldn't have interfered. Standing here defending Hana and her mother, the butler, baffled by the decree, listened as Hana's mother questioned why the government was doing this to her daughter. Turning to Lady Hana, the butler declared, how could there be a decree ordering the murder of a 15-year-old girl? As her butler, I will show no mercy to Sumijin, even if he is one of the 12 generals. Should he harm Lady Hana? When the butler attempted to attack, Sumijin repelled him with a single finger. Sumijin noted the butler's determination, reflecting that he had hoped the Duchess's butler might, for once, make him feel something. Yet the butler had disappointed him by burning a man. Sumijin stated, confirming the butler's gruesome fate. Hana, witnessing this horror, screamed Klein's name, reaching out to him in disbelief. Aruto merely observed the unfolding situation. Sumijin dismissed it all as futile, admitting that, even after killing the butler, he felt nothing. The magician mused. He might feel something if there were more at stake. He turned to the girls, asking if they understood. Hana looked at her mother, who reassured her, saying everything would be fine, and she would protect her. Hugging her daughter tightly, she whispered, I love you, my sweet Hana. Anna's mother stepped forward to shield her daughter, telling the magician to stay away from the young girl. She declared his goal was to destroy the dukes. Sujin countered, that's not it at all. From this moment the Colonel family will be safe, Sujin announced. The original plan was to exterminate the entire family, but the owner of the house obeyed the king's order. Hana's father rejected Lady Hana, in accordance with the king's decree. Hearing this, the mother cried out in disbelief, while Hana's face crumpled as she realized her father's betrayal. Sujin stated that the true duke knew what was more important than this girl. He knew what outweighed even his wife's life. You're still the duke's wife, he sneered, then pierced the woman, declaring that abandoning his daughter, for the sake of the family, was nothing short of stupidity. Watching it all, Hana sat sobbing. Her mother, now dead, Sumijin, remarked on the beautiful expression on the girl's face. Perhaps she is the same as me, for God's will is paramount. But most of all, I want to know if people truly exist. He mused. He then asked Hana if she ever felt that people in this world only seem to have their own will, but are in fact nothing more than illusions created by God's magic. Sumijin admitted he had conducted countless experiments, but couldn't find an answer, hoping the girl might tell him whether she was an illusion or a person. Tearfully, Hana affirmed that she was a person. Sumijin immediately demanded, who allowed you to speak? I was asking your soul. Hana recoiled in fear, and Sumijin seemed to relish the expression on her face. It appeared he was finally beginning to understand something. Through her, he unleashed a barrage of wind swords at Hana, observing her reaction and declared, "This is perfect, the girl is the best." Aruto emerged from his hiding spot, demanding Hana's release. Sumijin turned at the sight of Aruto, who then found himself unable to move. "What a perfect moment," Sumijin remarked. "For a young man, cannot possibly believe you have a right to exist." Approaching Aruto, Sumijin stared him down and declared, "You don't deserve to live. You're just a little boy who dared to interrupt my research, and by doing so you're practically begging for death." Sumijin considered killing Aruto, but then remembered he couldn't simply take the life of anyone not connected to the colonels. Turning to Aruto, he proposed a different approach. A brilliant idea struck him, prompting him to conduct an experiment. Aruto would be the observer, as he proceeded to kill Lady Hana. Lady Hana's pain mixed with Aruto's despair would allow him to truly experience what it meant for people to exist, rather than mere illusions. What a brilliant plan, he mused, reaffirming his belief that Sumijin was undeniably a genius. Aruto silently stretched out his hand, attempting to reach Hana. Sumijin observed that Aruto couldn't even scream, explaining that this was due to his standard of living, an immutable law of fortune, the very will of God. He advised Aruto to grasp this concept fully, for having been born with only 2 weeks of life, Aruto could only sit silently, utterly powerless. Aruto desperately wanted to move to beg Sumijin to stop, but Sumijin unleashed the full force of his power on Hana, and the girl perished. Aruto could only watch tears streaming down his face. Sumijin then declared the mission complete. He feigned regret, yet the magician felt absolutely nothing. The next moment he casually flung Aruto aside, who lay weeping, tormented by his failure to save Hana, by his own profound weakness. Sometime later, Hana's body was discovered under a watermill, in a stream on the outskirts of the city. A letter found with her claimed she lacked talent, and couldn't bear to disgrace her family's name. The handwriting on the note was distinctly not Hana's, yet it was presented as proof that she had orchestrated her own death. Aruto sat by a window recalling these events, and vowed never to let such a tragedy repeat. With only an hour remaining until Hana's death, suddenly a figure in a raincoat appeared on the street, and Aruto immediately lunged at him. Sumijin asked who he was, and Aruto introduced himself as just Aruto, a peasant with the first standard of living. Sumijin seemed surprised. Aruto then revealed, "You are the 12th General Euphony, Mr. Sumijin Salway, aren't you?" The magician replied that if Aruto knew this, he couldn't simply walk away, as he had an ongoing matter. Aruto retorted that he couldn't, for he was there to put an end to this stupidity. Hearing the word stupidity, Sumijin stated he was merely fulfilling a royal order. Since Aruto intended to stop him, he would simply have to eliminate Aruto. Aruto felt the familiar paralysis Sumijin had used, submission rendering Aruto immobile. The magician attacked Aruto with his staff, admonishing him, "Get out of my way. How dare you interfere with me? You have no idea what you're getting into." Aruto only stared at Sumijin, who couldn't comprehend the look in Aruto's eyes. Pushing him further would be pointless, so Sumijin urged Aruto to give up, throwing Aruto against the wall. Sumijin wiped sweat from his brow, pondering the strangeness of losing his temper. He found it peculiar how stubborn some children could be, a mere bump often disrupting everything. The next instant Aruto materialized before Sumijin, clutching his dragon bone dagger. Sumijin hadn't anticipated this at all, and then a shift in Aruto's displayed stats showed increased resistance. His life level had ascended from 1 star to 2. The magician noted Aruto's attack, unable to comprehend how a child, with only a first level of life, could possibly land a blow on him. What exactly was happening? Aruto recalled that, during his week of training with Magica and Lion, he had already adjusted his life level. The main issue had been enemy spells, specifically submission, but he had anticipated that with his current experience, he would soon develop resistance. As expected, the restriction lifted after several attacks, and Aruto mused that everything was proceeding according to plan. Aruto had never imagined his fundamental status could change, yet he had successfully altered his level, a feat considered impossible by the world's laws. This must be the power of the creation talent. Aruto mused. Aruto seemed to have just awakened. Observing Aruto from the air, Sumijin was unsure what trick Aruto was performing. Nevertheless, Sumijin informed Aruto that his interference would not alter the inevitable outcome. Aruto retorted that it was absolutely not Sumijin's decision to make. Recognizing Aruto's genuine confidence, The magician scoffed. What could such an insignificant guy hope to achieve by challenging the might of my staff? Dodging, Naruto marveled at the lightness of his body. The sheer amount of mana he now commanded was incomparable, confident he could cast any spell. Naruto admitted to the magician, yes, I may be an insignificant mage, but I intend to protect those dear to me. Naruto then invoked a barrage of spells. Concentrated fire magic of a shooting torch. The concentrated ice magic of an icicle coffin. The concentrated air magic of a storm ascension. And the concentrated water magic of a hydraulic explosion. Witnessing this, Sumi-jin understood everything. Naruto was simultaneously wielding several advanced level spells. This was no ordinary fight to be won with bare hands. Continuous assault was necessary. Sumi-jin realized that by acknowledging Naruto's power, he had already escalated the confrontation. Sumi-jin unleashed a deadly flash of black ash against Naruto in turn. Naruto countered with all his spells. Observing the incoming attack, Naruto realized his 4 spells were only equivalent to a single one. From Sumi-jin, confirming Sumi-jin's reputation as truly the best magician in the country. However, Naruto found Sumi-jin's skill not as overwhelming as he initially believed. With this level of challenge, he saw a distinct chance of victory. In the next instant, Naruto deployed water balloons, creating a dense cloud of steam. Sumi-jin swiftly recognized Naruto's tactic. Understanding, he aimed to obscure his vision. Naruto immediately closed the distance, attacking Sumi-jin with his sword. Sumi-jin flawlessly parried and evaded every strike. Sumi-jin declared Naruto's efforts and annoyance, reminding him that defeating one of Euphonia's 12 generals was far from simple. Naruto struggled to comprehend how Sumi-jin dodged his attacks so flawlessly, recognizing his opponent's formidable agility, in addition to his magical prowess. Determined not to miss again, Naruto prepared for another assault on Sumi-jin. Sumi-jin, perceiving Naruto as a persistent, annoying fly, deployed a sensitive grid of highly concentrated mana. Within this area, he could detect the slightest movement or mana flow. He dared Naruto to enter, warning that touching the grid would be his undoing. As Naruto neared the grid, Sumi-jin initially believed he was attacking. However, he quickly realized the grid hadn't registered Naruto, who had suddenly changed his trajectory. Detecting no active magic, Sumi-jin wondered, what exactly is Naruto doing? In the very next moment, Naruto struck Sumi-jin, who could barely believe it had happened. Naruto declared the fight finished. Yet Sumi-jin, to his astonishment, began to think him mentioning a lord. Looking up, Naruto realized a street lamp was plummeting directly towards him. He managed to dodge it, prompting the magician to remark that Naruto wouldn't appreciate his thanks. Even so, the magician questioned Naruto, demanding what kind of trick reflected Sumi-jin's magic. I couldn't detect its activation. Yet that was my magic, wasn't it? Naruto internally confirmed this was a hack he'd implemented specifically for this battle. His plan involved using steam to disorient the magician, forcing him into a confined space. Only one step remained, and it was no mere accident. If a god truly intervened, Naruto wouldn't have stood a chance from the start. As Naruto pondered this intently, the magician, receiving no reply, decided that if Naruto didn't wish to answer, it wasn't truly necessary. Using the oracle of the god Fortunas, the magician then declared his order to eliminate the germ of the hero as soon as possible. However, the emergence of such an obstacle suggested something deeper. Hearing germ of the hero, Naruto wondered why Sumi-jin knew about this talent. He decided to question the magician further about it. Sumi-jin complimented Naruto's quick reaction, then asked if he had ever heard of the hero's talent. He explained it as a rare gift, appearing only once every century. Historically, this gift always manifests just before a major war. While the hero's talent sounds grand, it's actually the worst kind. Its very existence sowing discord in the world. Thus the god Fortuna's attempts to eliminate the hero, while still a fetus. Sumi-jin was a trusted individual. Naruto now understood the foolishness of his past actions. The magician then turned to Naruto, elaborating on the situation. Naruto, addressing the magician, proposed that perhaps it was the opposite, catching the magician completely by surprise. Naruto then asserted that it wasn't the hero who caused discord in the world, but rather discord in the world that caused a hero. The magician challenged Naruto to prove this claim. Naruto admitted he couldn't, but argued the probability of his theory being true was greater than 0. The magician stated he appreciated a doubting mind, but insisted that without a theory, Aruto must remain silent. He concluded it was time to end this, attacking Aruto and demanding if he would finally surrender. Aruto realized the magician was attacking him, even at point-blank range. Samijian observed that Aruto showed no fear. His face was devoid of any pain, that even upon seeing him, the magician sensed no feeling. Demanding Aruto's death was it really impossible, so they fought. Aruto understood that if God intervened again, he would continue fighting until it occurred. Aruto attempted to dodge the magician's attacks. Noticing Aruto, the magician sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The next moment, Aruto landed a punch directly on the magician's face, catching him completely off guard. Aruto followed up with several more strikes, declaring it's already too late. Sumijin could not comprehend what was happening. Aruto was moving, with a drastically different demeanor than before. Did he not give his best until that moment? As Aruto pinned the magician to the ground, Sumijin felt his body suddenly become impossibly heavy. What was it? Was it really a weight spell? Wasn't it lost during the war in the Age of the Gods? Even as the kingdom's greatest magician, he found himself unable to counteract this magic. But why is this cordoning off? Perhaps Aruto has been casting a spell on himself, all this time exposing himself against him. At that moment, the magician roared at Aruto to disappear. Such disrespect he would never forgive Aruto. As Aruto witnessed the power, the magician concentrated into the staff. He realized its true nature. Mana pulsed erratically from the staff, and Aruto, observing this, understood it could not withstand such power. No single artifact could accept such an amount of mana. Was a heavenly crystal installed in the staff? The magician declared. It was too late for Aruto to realize anything. This staff is made from the bones of dead kings and orichalcum. It is a masterpiece of the kingdom's technology, and the main element of the staff is an artificial celestial crystal. If used, it will cause huge damage to the area. He was certain he would lose his post as general of Euphonia, but that no longer mattered. Of the one who mocked him, he wouldn't even leave ashes. Towering high above Aruto in the air, the magician commanded the staff to unleash the absolute power of absolute death upon Aruto, demanding ruthless destruction. Use the artifact of the mourner of the setting sun. Aruto understood he could not evade this blow. Escaping the immediate destruction zone, Aruto braced himself. The magician landed, and thinking Aruto possessed the strength of a first-class wizard. But Aruto played and to think. He spent almost all his mana on some peasant. The magician regretted not killing the Colonel family long ago. Having heard an experienced butler worked for them, he had hoped to conserve his magic regardless. He needed to reach them, making his way through the avalanches. But then he saw Aruto standing before him, unable to comprehend how this was possible, or why Aruto was still alive. Aruto, gazing at the bleeding magician who clutched his hand, realized how close he had been to death. The moment the magic was released, Aruto had activated his prepared hack. He withstood the blow for as long as possible, simultaneously activating the grave and falling into a crack he created. Aruto avoided a direct hit, but the shockwave itself was powerful enough. If this technique had been launched when Aruto was at full magical power, he would have definitely died. From where Aruto was, the magician warned him not to approach, then struck him right on the head with a stone. Aruto, struggling to keep his footing, knew he could win compared to the pain of losing Hana. The magician's attacks felt insignificant. Approaching the magician, Aruto declared him a weakling. To protect those he held dear, he would defy fate and delete Manga. Head on, the magician was flung away, now lying unconscious directly in front of Aruto. Aruto drew his sword, holding it over the magician. He knew he had to kill him while he was down, otherwise Hana would be in danger again. He considered this his chance. His earlier attack had proven effective. He was certain the same tactics wouldn't work again, so he had to kill him now. Yet he hesitated just then. Lion arrived, leaping from the roof. Master, what happened? He exclaimed. Bewildered by the scene, Aruto recognized Lion. Lion hurried to Aruto, asking what occurred, but stumbled, twisting his leg and collapsing. Aruto sheathed his blade as Lion tied up the magician. He sensed the gravity of the situation, but assured Aruto that all was well. The vile Sumijin has been captured, Lion declared. Killed by me twice. By Master Lin, Aruto corrected him, explaining that he hadn't truly defeated him anyway. Hana is just a talent, a germ of a hero. What nonsense, Lion muttered, stating it was impossible to take this life. Aruto conceded Lion was right, yet his trembling hands prevented him from delivering the final blow. Lion approached Aruto, explaining that it was natural to hesitate when taking a life. Killing demons was an entirely different matter. Sumi-John had caused immense damage, and Lion was certain the government would handle him. He was relieved Aruto was unharmed. Seeing Lion before him, Aruto smiled. Lion then helped Aruto to his feet. Lion confessed he was still reeling from the fact that Aruto had defeated one of Euphonia's 12 generals, declaring him a true master. Aruto insisted it wasn't so. Aruto explained that his victory was only due to unforeseen circumstances. For Sumi-John, he had caught Sumi-John by surprise and fought in a situation where Aruto held an overwhelming advantage indeed. Had the circumstances been different, he would have suffered far worse injuries. Aruto realized the most crucial reason for his victory was the significant increase in his standard of living, which alone boosted his status immensely. Aruto reflected that, had he possessed only one level remaining, he would have certainly perished. Lion observed Aruto deep in thought, and noticed he seemed unwell. Asking if he could move, Aruto replied that he was fine, just thinking, and then asked if he and Magica weren't supposed to be together. Lion explained that she wasn't, as she had left the hotel before him. Aruto then asked where she had gone. Lion stated that no one knew. It was Magica's decision. Aruto reassured him that she would be fine. Suddenly Aruto pushed Lion away, despite Lion helping him walk, as he sensed something passing between them. Aruto realized he still hadn't fully recovered. Moreover, he saw Citri standing before them, who greeted them, remarking that it had been a long time. Lion turned to Aruto and asked who the girl was. Citri, bewildered that Aruto didn't remember her, reminded him, "I'm Citri Justice, the one who helped secure the dragon's reward, one of Euphonia's 12 generals, an official of the Council of True and False. How could you not remember, if your brains are still in place?" Lion, observing her hair, wondered about the spirals, and thought the girl looked like a villain. She approached Lion, criticizing Aruto's lack of style for failing to appreciate her haircut's beauty. Aruto retorted, "You mean you're the only one who has any feeling for it?" Turning away from Lion, the girl demanded what was wrong with him. She declared she'd had enough. They couldn't waste time arguing with a stupid commoner. "I am here for Aruto," she stated, pointing a finger at Aruto. The girl declared him evil. Aruto was taken aback by this declaration. "What nonsense," Lion retorted. Defending Aruto, it wasn't Aruto who devastated the city, but Sumi-Jin Master did nothing wrong. The girl replied that she was, of course, aware of the situation. Sumi-Jin had been removed from his post as general, and measures were being taken against him. But that wasn't her concern. Her mission, she stated, was to eliminate those recognized as evil by God. "In the name of the Judicial Council of True and False," she declared, "I condemn you for your sins." She then lunged at Aruto with her sword. Still reeling, Aruto sat on the ground, realizing he was under attack once more. This time Lion stood before him, sword drawn, shielding him. Lion questioned the judicial authorities' role, asking if it was to murder innocents, declaring he wouldn't allow a single finger to touch his master. Citri, repelled, bounced back her attack, blocked by Lion's sword. She mused aloud that she had dismissed him as a mere muscular fool, but he was clearly highly skilled. Lion in turn challenged her, asking how she intended to defeat him with such a thin blade, asserting he would handle her himself, not Aruto. From behind Lion, Aruto urged caution, explaining the girl's weapon was special. He asked Lion to trust him. Lion advanced on the girl, offering to attack, and calling her a curly-haired villain. Aruto tried to warn him at that moment. The girl struck Lion, and Naruto immediately sensed the danger. Citri then asserted that Lion couldn't defeat her, successfully wounding him. Lion, initially impervious to pain, he explained his maximum damage resistance meant the blow shouldn't have hurt. Yet in that instant, he felt a sharp agony and blood gushed from his hand. Aruto could only gasp his name. Clutching his hand, Lion comprehended the intense pain. Aruto, rising and shouting Lion's name, rushed to his side, asking if he was alright. He didn't understand how Lion could be hurt, as Lion believed his pain resistance was absolute. Then looking at Citri, Aruto realized she, despite her appearance, had activated a special ability. Aruto explained that the sword was an artifact, embodying their belief in absolute justice, and belonged to Citri. Compared to Simigan and the other 12 generals, Citri's inherent strength was significantly less. Aruto even suggested Lion possessed greater raw power. Lion still couldn't comprehend how the girl had wounded him. Aruto clarified that this was precisely why they couldn't win. The weapon cursed opponent stronger than its wielder. Citri, understanding Lion's superior strength, had intentionally attacked him to activate this curse. Consequently, Lion's damage resistance was nullified, leaving him deeply wounded. Aruto explained that she couldn't be neutralized with a single blow. He revealed that even a mere touch to her hair had the same devastating effect. Inflicting too much damage would cost them their own lives. The stronger Aruto became, the more difficult victory would be. It was through this weapon that Citri Justice maintained dominion over 12 generals in Euphonia. Hearing this entire explanation, Lion found it deeply unfair. He questioned Aruto how could they defeat the girl. Then Citri, observing Aruto, realized he possessed an unusual amount of knowledge. She questioned him, did she use this weapon on Aruto? Addressing him directly, she pressed, and where did you acquire such extensive information? She even speculated if he had fought her. In a previous life, Aruto dismissed it as a foolish joke, warning that if she was merely stalling to recover, he wouldn't allow it. Suddenly, an explosion erupted, leaving everyone bewildered. Upon seeing the blast, Aruto realized it originated from Cornello's house. He then questioned if anyone other than Simigan could be attacking them. Aruto turned to Lion, urging him that they had to hurry. A moment later, they spotted a blinding light. Aruto sensed a power far exceeding Simigan's. Realizing Hana was in danger, they found themselves pursued by Citri, who scornfully remarked, "Did he truly believe he could escape me in such a state?" At the same time, Citri pondered, what was that noise? Was it their god fortune shining? She observed Aruto, who seemed to be delaying his conscience, tormented before the gods. Was she right? She moved to end this by attacking Aruto with her sword. Aruto, consumed by his own thoughts, wished he had truly defeated Simigan. Yet he still couldn't save Hana. Unexpectedly, Ru proved useful, as Aruto never imagined he would resist Citri. Aruto grabbed the slime, bewildered by Ru's actions, and initially thought it was a joke. As the substance spread through his hands, Aruto desperately tried to understand, pleading with Ru to answer and not to die, citing the countless memories that bound them together. The next moment, Aruto was left with only a single split ball. Citri sat before Aruto, who was furious that she had killed Ru. He drew his sword, determined to attack her. The next moment, Aruto found himself back in the familiar void. The figure on the throne remarked on Aruto's obliviousness to the artifact's curse, greeting him with a comment about how long it had been. This was the entity responsible for sending Aruto through 2 lives. Expressed its unimpressed reaction to Aruto losing control in a fit of rage. Did Aruto already know about the artifact's horror? Aruto realized this was the same place he had arrived after his previous deaths, leading him to believe he had died once more. A chair materialized behind him, and the entity offered sit down, stating that they now had the chance to speak again. Aruto asked if he had died, to which the entity replied that he had not. His soul had simply reached its limit. He could be reborn, though his current body would be discarded. His soul, however, would remain as it was in his last life. The entity noted that Aruto was living a much harsher life, this time around shaken by Ru's death. Aruto's soul had been a mere millimeter from complete annihilation. Aruto asserted that he had already died. He then demanded to be returned immediately. The entity stated that before doing so, it had one question for Aruto. What would he do upon returning to that world? Aruto declared he would kill Citri. The moment he returned, he would exact vengeance for Ru. At that moment, a rift opened beneath Aruto. The entity then informed him that he could not return to that world. Aruto, bewildered, questioned why, given that the girl had killed his most loyal partner. The creature then questioned Aruto's purpose. It reminded Aruto of the request he made when he arrived. Just before leaving, as the creature spoke, Aruto recalled its smiling hand. Seeing Aruto's memory stir, the creature affirmed their shared goals. They could not idly watch as his soul was destroyed before fulfilling its purpose. It advised Aruto to calm down, and then reiterated its question. What would he do upon returning to this world? Aruto realized his burning desire for revenge for Ru, but understood that surrendering to emotion would only lead to the loss of even more cherished individuals. He had begun this new life specifically to save Hana. Aruto explained his resolve to the creature. which then confirmed his understanding. By risking his very soul, Aruto aimed to save someone dear to him. For this reason, they had sent Aruto forth towards victory. Aruto declared that he would resume their bet, stating that there was no possibility of replaying until his soul was completely expended. The blade halted mere inches from Citri's face. She stared at Aruto, urging him to wait and calling him a sinner. Aruto mused that his sword was exceptionally potent. Against powerful adversaries, however, there was also an ability designed to exploit weak opponents, though its use would curse the wielder as a backlash. He further considered that Citri should have suffered significant damage during her assault on Ru. With a firm gaze, Aruto told her he no longer had time to waste on her. Citri was visibly surprised by his declaration. Turning to Lion, Aruto instructed him to evacuate Ru to a safe location. Lion then questioned if Aruto intended to proceed alone, insisting that he would accompany him. Aruto then turned to Lion, explaining he did not want Ru to suffer any further. His plan was for them to return together once he saved Hana. Until then, Aruto himself was responsible for taking care of Lion and protecting Ru. Lion, in turn, stipulated that Aruto must protect Hana and return alive. Aruto smiled, affirming he would do exactly that. Bidding Aruto farewell, Lion then turned to Citra, telling her she should have fled. Citra, however, failed to grasp his meaning. Lion addressed her, pointing out that as one of the 12 generals, her lack of understanding was alarming. He mused that perhaps this kingdom was truly nearing its end. As Lion spoke, other beings began to descend from the sky. Magica ran with all her might, sensing Aruto was engaged in battle. She felt his powerful magical energy and surmised he was likely fighting Simogen. Realizing she needed to assist him, simultaneously, an alarming presence loomed over the Colonel house. She wondered if it was the work of the god Fortimus. Only today had the gift of the Germ of God appeared in Hana's life. Magica understood that divine forces were stirring, even before the germ of the hero matured. But she didn't believe it was yet necessary to evacuate Hana. Then she witnessed something descend from the sky, detonating the house. It was the shadows of God, and Hana was in grave danger. Entering the house, Magica witnessed the shadows of God slaughtering its inhabitants. Instantly realizing Hana's parents and the butler were already dead, vowing not to let them touch the embryo of God, Magica fiercely fought the shadows. She then heard Hana's scream from the top floor. Realizing numerous shadows blocked her path, Magica ordered them to clear a path, breaking through them as she rushed towards Hana. A shadow of God stood before her, hurling a sword towards Hana. Magica urged Hana to hold on. Her own sword struck the shadow, and retrieving it, Magica addressed the girl grimly, informing her that her dad, mom, and all the employees were dead. Magica embraced Hana, chiding herself for her delay, but reassuring her that everything would be fine. Though Hana cried, Magica vowed to protect her, ensuring the shadows would never lay a finger on her. Again, Aruto also rushed into the house, realizing with a heavy heart that everything was unfolding exactly as before. Defeating Simogen hadn't altered fate. If so, then Hana must already be dead. Aruto thought just then. Magica called out to him, with Hana standing safely behind her. Aruto felt immense relief that Magica had saved the girl. Addressing them, he asked if they were injured. Magica cut him off, stating that explanations could wait, and urged them to listen closely. What appeared in the sky were the shadows of God, and now something bigger, stronger will emerge. There is almost no time left. At that moment, Aruto saw another entity descend from the sky. He initially thought it was a demon, but then realized he couldn't believe his eyes at what stood before him. This same sensation he felt when fighting demons was magnified into an even greater power. If natural demons arose spontaneously, this was an entity purposely crafted by God. It was a good demon. Aruto then worked to undo the hacking he had established during his battle with Simogen. He understood this would neutralize some of the magic. Thanks to his newfound resistance to this difference, Aruto felt he could act. He instructed Hana to simply stand still, as he could now fight effectively, with his blade drawn from its scabbard. At that moment, the demon closed in, attacking Aruto. Aruto realized her speed was immense. As he engaged the demon with his blade, the weapon shattered under the onslaught. The dragon's fang dagger was harder than nitrile. How could it break? Aruto wondered. Evading the girl's relentless attacks, Magica intervened, fending off the demon. and Aruto thanked her. The girl warned him to stay alert, as even she struggled to keep track of their foe. The artifact she carried marked her as a heavy warrior, yet her dexterity rivaled Magica's own, a trait of the squirrel tribe. She was a creation born of God. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Aruto understood they needed to split up. He instructed Magica to take the vanguard, while he covered the rear. Magica acknowledged understanding the plan, and launched her attack. Magica, whose speed could rival their opponents, would engage her directly. As the two girls clashed, Aruto seized the opportunity, using a micro-flash to target the demon. Coinciding with Aruto's move, Magica, fully comprehending their tactic, pressed her attack. Aruto, directing beams of light, positioned them to follow Magica's movements. As she dodged the foe's attacks, Aruto delivered another blow from a blind spot, striking the demon directly in the back. The demon registered the hit. The damage was minor, but undeniably effective. Suddenly, the girl's wings glowed with an intensified brilliance, perplexing Aruto in the next instant. She attacked him with a volley of feathers from her wings. Aruto realized their sheer number made evasion impossible. The razor-sharp feathers sliced into him from all directions. He decided to activate his hacking skill, but at that critical moment, his skill failed to activate. A feather pierced his chest, sending Aruto flying backward, crashing into a nearby kernel house. Magica screamed his name, calling out Aruto. Aruto lay on the ground unresponsive. A feather was lodged directly in his heart.